That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camila Tomy, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camila Tomy Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon and a very, very happy Monday to you. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, as the world stares down the barrel of all-out war in the Middle East, the Prime Minister is today set to speak on the issue. And we'll bring you Rishi Sunak's speech and Sir Keir Starmer's response live from the Commons in around about 30 minutes' time. And it's a busy day for the Prime Minister as Mr Sunak's flagship Rwanda bill once again ping-pongs back to the Commons the day after a record 500 asylum seekers arrived by small boats. The big question is this, the same as ever. Will a single flight ever leave for Rwanda? Next up, as Donald Trump's trial for alleged hush money paid to porn star Stormy Daniels kicks off in New York, we'll ask a simple question. Can the former president ever get a fair trial in America? And the RAC is imploring the government to scrap all smart motorways after more than 50 deaths. And we'll speak to a campaigner whose husband was killed on a smart motorway by lorry in 2019. And that's all coming up between now and 6 o'clock. Welcome to the show. Always an absolute joy to have your company on this Monday. What a week ahead we've got. We're staring down the barrel of war in the Middle East. The Prime Minister about to address the nation. We wait upon his words with bated breath. Sir Keir Starmer will respond. Joe Biden is saying Israel should take the victory. Iran is saying we exercise restraint. Macron is saying that Iran responded with far too much aggression. We really are on a knife edge. We'll be crossing to the House of Commons in about 30 minutes' time. For that, we'll also discuss throughout the show what that means for us here in Britain. Increased divisions on our own streets. Could it mean booming oil prices, yet more pounds and pence going out of our pockets because of wars in faraway lands? Get in touch all the usual ways. Send your comments in. This is as much your show as it is mine. Send your views in and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. I'm logged in. You see my mush. Keep it clean. I'll read a few out before the end of the show. But before that, let's steam into your headlines, and it's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon. The top stories. Former US President Donald Trump has described the start of his hush money trial as an assault on America. He was speaking at a New York courthouse as he prepares to face the first of 4 criminal trials. He's been charged in connection to a case involving hush money paid to adult film star Stormy Daniels. He faces a maximum of 4 years in prison per charge if convicted. However, it's more likely he'd avoid a jail term and be fined instead. The trial is expected to last 6 to 8 weeks. It is the first time ever that a US president, former or current, has faced a criminal trial.
Political persecution. This is a persecution like never before. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And again, it's a case that should have never been brought. It's an assault on America. And that's why I'm very proud to be here. This is an assault on our country. And it's a country that's failing. It's a country that's run by an incompetent man who's very much involved in this case. This is really an attack on a political opponent.
President Trump escalating tensions in the Middle East will be addressed by the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in the Commons this afternoon. The Foreign Secretary has confirmed RAF jets shot down a number of Iranian drones and missiles after hundreds were fired at Israel at the weekend. Lord Cameron says the UK will now consider further sanctions against Tehran. The United Nations has warned the Middle East is on the brink and is urging Israel not to retaliate. But the country's war cabinet is split on the timing and scale of any response. Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey says Israel has the right to defend itself.
We have an important role to play alongside allies, as we did over the weekend. It's defensive action, and it was in the face of an utterly unprecedented and unacceptable Iranian attack, direct from Iran as well as from militia groups in other countries.
534 people were intercepted in the English Channel yesterday, making it the highest number of crossings on a single day so far this year. It means the total number of small boat arrivals this year now stands at a provisional total of 6,265. It comes as the government's flagship Rwanda policy returns to Parliament, with MPs due to debate the latest amendments by peers. 3 people have died and another's in a critical condition following a car crash in North London. It happened near the Staples Corner retail park just before midnight. 5 men, all thought to be in their early 20s, were in one car. Police do not believe any other vehicles were involved in the incident. 3 people were pronounced dead and 2 others were taken to hospital. The 5th man's injuries are not life-threatening. Emergency services have now removed the wreckage of the vehicle. 2 men have been jailed after police found cocaine hidden inside blocks of cheese. Just over £17 million worth of cocaine was seized from the blocks of cheese after officers raided a unit in Blackburn last May. 46-year-old Salim Chowdhury has been jailed for 27.5 years for admitting conspiracy to supply cocaine and money laundering, whilst Raidul Mohabbath has been jailed for 16 years. A man has been arrested following reports of another stabbing in Sydney. A live stream of a sermon at Christ the Good Shepherd Church in the suburb of Wakeley shows a bishop being targeted by a man before worshippers tackled the offender to the ground. It's not yet clear what he was armed with. New South Wales Police has confirmed those being treated suffered non-life-threatening injuries. Meanwhile, the father of the man who fatally stabbed 6 people at a shopping centre in Sydney has apologised for his son's actions. Joel Couchy killed 5 women and a male security guard on Saturday. Police say they're investigating whether he was specifically targeting women. They believe the 40-year-old suffered from schizophrenia and used drugs, including meth and psychedelics. Andrew Couchy says his son was a very sick boy.
I'm extremely sorry. I'm heartbroken for you. Look, this is so horrendous that I can't even explain it. You're trying to give you an intelligent conversation. I can't do it because I'm just devastated. I love my son. I made myself a servant to my son when I found out he had a mental illness. I became his servant. I did everything because I love that boy.
And the FBI has confirmed it's on board the cargo ship Dali in Maryland, carrying out a criminal investigation into the Baltimore bridge collapse last month. 6 people were killed when a cargo ship lost power and hit the structure. The Washington Post says the federal criminal investigation will partly focus on whether the crew knew the vessel had serious problems with its systems before it left the port. Work to clear the wreck and restore traffic through the shipping channel is ongoing. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, there's only one place to start today, and there's a nervous wait for Israel to make its next move after Iran's attack on Saturday night. And, of course, Iran sent around 350 drones and missiles at Israel, and a small number were shot down by RAF jets. And Foreign Secretary Lord David Cameron has urged Israel to be smart as well as tough by not escalating the conflict. Well, I'm joined now by our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. We are awaiting Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister, to address the Commons in about 25 minutes' time. Keir Starmer to follow. Joe Biden saying take the win. Emmanuel Macron saying Iran's attack was disproportionate. Lord Cameron urging Israel to think with its head as well as its heart. Mark White, the Middle East is on a knife edge.
Well, it is, and everybody is watching what the next move from Israel will be. The War Cabinet has been meeting in Israel over the last couple of hours to discuss what those options would be. Sources are saying from the Israeli government that all options remain on the table, all options are open for Israel here. But clearly, if Israel decides to attack Iran directly on Iranian soil, and there is no way that we could imagine that Iran would not respond to that again with more in the way of missile and drone strikes. And in fact, they have said very publicly that that would be their next option. As far as they're concerned, they say that the action that took place on Saturday night has now concluded. But if Israel was to respond, then they would respond again in a very significant way, a way that would be more powerful, they say, than the 331 missiles and drones that were launched on Saturday night. And then you have the potential, Martin, for this downward spiral into a very dangerous situation with a regional war erupting in the Middle East.
And of course, Mark, that would mean the wider region being pulled in, and the RAF have already been involved. There's a huge conversation domestically about the continued supplying of weapons to Israel. Mark, do you think once again Britain could be pulled into a war in a faraway land?
Well, the UK won't get, we're told, involved in any action that Israel take in terms of action against Iran. But of course, if Israel comes under attack again from Iran in something similar to the manner that it did on Saturday, then the UK, the US and other allies, it seems, will be there to protect Israel in that event. But there is a great deal of concern, understandably so, from the UK, the US and other allies about the potential ramifications of this escalating into a regional war. We have sent more Typhoon combat jets to Cyprus, along with support aircraft, those tanker aircraft, to help with the Operation Shader. This is the operation in Syria and Iraq against the Islamic State terror group that's been ongoing for some time. But those jets are also under instructions that if there is an attack on Israel again and any of those drones or missiles come into their area of responsibility, then they can do as they did at the weekend when they shot down about a dozen of those drones. But all kinds of ramifications, Martin, if this does escalate in terms of what it will mean for the oil price, for the price and disruption to the aviation sector, not to mention the potential for our forces out in that region and our diplomatic consulates to be directly targeted as well.
OK, Mark White, thank you for that update. We'll, of course, join you throughout the show for continued updates. Now it's reported that at least 2 Tory MPs will boycott the government's Eid event this afternoon over its support of Israel. And I'm joined in the studio by Naveed Asghar, who's the deputy chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum, and also down the line by the chairman, and also the chairman of the Glasgow Conservative and Unionist Association. There we go, got that right. Naveed, welcome to the studio. So, why is this boycott going ahead? You'd think this would be a day to come together, a day to celebrate, and yet it seems to have been made political. Who's threatening to stay away?
From As you see from the news reports, there's some MPs probably staying away, and some peers have said that they're not going to attend. But I'd like to highlight that these events are for the public. They're not political events, and they should not be politicised by anybody from any political party. Events like Eid, Diwali, Vaisakhi, Easter, Christmas are celebrated for all the communities. And this is an opportunity for people up and down the country who have done well in their field, be it the NHS, armed forces, volunteers, and people from business background, entrepreneurs, and, whole swathes of people. And it's usually a highlight of their, probably a lifetime, especially if they're not somebody that's politically involved, to attend these events.
In an ideal world, that would be the case, yet we just said there at least 2 Conservative MPs are staying away. Who and why?
I'm not privy to the names of those people. I see in the media there's some names being mentioned. I've not been directly
Baroness
told.
has
that's
been
one of
mentioned.
the names that's been mentioned, yeah. I would always, again, come back to the saying that I think it's important for people to attend these events, to engage with politicians, to engage with senior ministers, MPs, and have frank discussions. And if they have any issues that are concerning them, to actually discuss these issues with politicians. Staying away or boycotting is never going to, get your word across to them.
We're used to seeing those on the political left and the Labour Party falling out over their party's position on Gaza, not quite so much from the Conservative side. Baroness Wasey has said in the past, in 2014, she quit David Cameron's then cabinet, saying the government's policy over Gaza was morally indefensible. Presumably she feels the same again now.
Most likely. And here's the thing, look, the government has a lot of decisions to make. The government has got to think of geopolitical situation, the international situation, and of course there's lots of competing voices within government wanting different things. The government has to look out for the interest of the United Kingdom and obviously the population of the United Kingdom. As we've seen, there's been an escalation just over the last couple of days, and does the UK want to be involved and get further involved in these things? It's a decision for government.
We're looking very smart, and you're about to go and enjoy the event yourself, aren't you?
I am indeed.
Have a great time. Thanks for joining us in the studio, Navi. Now, Iran's drone attack on Saturday night came just a day before reports claimed the country is stirring the pot of religious prejudice by stoking protests outside schools and on the streets of the UK. Well, I'm joined by Dr. Paul Stott, who's the head of security and extremism at Policy Exchange. Welcome to the show, Dr. Stott. Very, very concerning report. This Islamic group was responsible for stirring up the protests, something very dear to my heart, something I've reported on a lot, and that was outside the Batley Grammar School. They seem to be the Islamic centre of England, almost the enemy within. Tell us more about them, and more to the point, they seem to have received a lot of money from taxpayers during COVID, almost £250,000 of taxpayers paying for the privilege of this disruption.
Good afternoon, Martin. What our report focuses on a whole series of issues with regards to Iran and its intent and its approach towards the United Kingdom. But really the sort of modern campaigns against blasphemy that we've had originate with the Rushdie affair, with the fatwa on Salman Rushdie that the Iranian government issued in the Ayatollah Khomeini issued in 1989. And I'm afraid those problems have continued. The Rushdie fatwa was never rescinded, and we saw in 2022 a series of protests outside cinemas where a film, The Lady of Medina, was accused of blasphemy. And those protests we chart originate in Iran, and the ongoing protests about blasphemy. It'd be very hard to imagine them without that impetus that comes from Iranian actors, and we don't really have a policy for dealing with this. And that's one of the things that we're calling for, really, is the government to look much more seriously what we refer to as Iranian subversion.
And it's been described here, the Islamic Centre for England is the voice of Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah. Well, they've just launched a massive drone attack on Israel. If they are behind the school protests in Batley and also the movie protest, The Lady of Heaven, what do you think should be done about them? I mean, do these people have a rightful place to exist like this in Britain, or is this crossing the Rubicon into something more sinister, Dr. Stott?
Well, the Islamic Centre of England was established back in the 1990s. It's had 4 different directors in that time, and each was appointed by Iran's supreme leader. Now, the Islamic Centre of England is in Maida Vale. It's at a high profile in a series of controversies. It's hosted events in the past commemorating the Islamic Revolution, which brought Ayatollah Khomeini to power. When Qasem Soleimani of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, was assassinated, there was a commemorative event held at the centre. And it's that sort of action which has brought the attention of the Charity Commission, who've been investigating it now for some time, I think over a year. And one of the things we stress in the report is really it's time for the Charity Commission to get its skates on to look at this organisation properly, because it doesn't do anybody any good for these things just to just drift on, if you like. It's time for the authorities to get a grip.
It seems astonishing they had £4 million in the bank, yet got £250,000 from the taxpayer during lockdowns. And behind that protest outside Batley Grammar School, that's all these years later, to this day, 3 years in fact, that teacher is still in hiding. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Paul Stott, who's the Head of Security and Extremism at Policy Exchange. Now, still plenty of time to grab your chance to win a Greek cruise, travel goodies and a £10,000 tax-free cash bank balance boost. And here's all the details you need to hop on board.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Great stuff. Now, the Rwanda bill is back in the House of Commons today, and more than 6,000 people have now crossed the Channel this year, including over 500 illegal migrants who arrived yesterday. Will a single flight ever leave for Rwanda? We'll find out soon. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's see what you've been saying at home. You're very vexed about these China cyber attacks. Colin says, what the hell is our Secret Service doing? They've only just realised what China's up to. You just couldn't make it up.
We could have told you.
We knew. We're not surprised. So Colin, we agree with you. Quite why it's taken GCHQ or MI6 or whoever it is, MI5. It'd be MI5 to know what's going on.
And Rod has said, thank you, Rod, if you know how you vote, if they know how you vote, coupled with mass data held also on you, do you not believe they can influence your decision-making process in any way? They won't know.
I'm not sure they know how you vote, because that's
not on record anyway, is it?
It is not.
And Ken says these are only able to be carried out because of computers, internet, mobile phones, etc. It seems to me that these inventions are ruining our lives, and therefore we were much safer and much happier without these inventions. There is a school of thought that would agree with that, Ken, very much so.
I sort of often think it myself, really.
Me too.
The dark web. I mean, how many people have been murdered because of the dark web?
You do wonder as well.
Brianna Jai.
Yeah, you do wonder. I look at my kids' generation and I wonder whether they will grow up and have a complete rejection of all of this, and they will just say enough, because they will think we were all insane for having become so addicted to our phones. I wonder whether, as a generation after generation do, they will reject it. Wayne, blame Western governments for the rise of China. People were saying this 10 years ago and every country ignored it. That is a really good point, Wayne, because we've taken Chinese investment, and obviously our houses are full of items we've bought from made in China.
And if you remember as well, we had to get them out of the 5G. Huawei.
We did.
Get them out, literally extricate them.
Yeah,
from
that
it.
was at least one thing I think they did quite well.
Yeah.
And Jan says if they've seen the electoral roll, what else have they been looking at? That's the threat to our democracy. They never do things by halves. I'm much more worried about my own government looking at what I do online, to be fair.
Point is, though, go back, we said before, the electoral roll is a public document which you can access if you go to your library.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 3:24. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. And GB News viewers can see live pictures now from the House of Commons, where Rishi Sunak will soon make a statement about Iran's drone and missile attack on Israel. That's around about 3:30, 5-6 minutes time. And of course, we'll bring that to you live as it happens. But before that, the Rwanda bill is back in the House of Commons today. MPs are discussing the flagship legislation after the government suffered a number of defeats in the House of Lords last month. And it comes a day after 534 migrants crossed the Channel on small boats yesterday alone. Over 6,000 people have now arrived illegally in the UK in 2024, and that's an increase of 28% on this time last year. Well, let's cross now to Downing Street and speak with our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, Groundhog Day once again. Round and round we go. More ping-pong than a youth club. Now Rwanda is back in the Commons. What can we expect today?
Yes, it is. Hello, Martin. MPs are back here after their break of 2.5 weeks, the recess was, for Easter, and they will be voting on the House of Lords amendments that they set before Easter in the House of Commons later this afternoon and into the evening. There'll be about 7 votes on the amendments that will be put forward. We expect all of those to be rejected. Then it will go back to the House of Lords tomorrow and back to the House of Commons the day after. We expect it will all be done and dusted, potentially by Thursday. Now, the government is saying they are confident of getting flights off within a few weeks. Rishi Sunak originally said in the spring, of course the spring ends at the end of May. I asked his spokesman that in the lobby briefing a bit earlier. They wouldn't be pinned down, but they did say as soon as possible. They were asked too about the number, the highest number in one day this year coming across yesterday, and they did say that yes, those numbers were unacceptable, and this is why it is important to pass the bill. I think worth reflecting, it's now 2 years and 1 day since the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the then Home Secretary Priti Patel announced this plan. The idea was you come illegally on small boats, you will be sent on a one-way ticket to Rwanda, and that will act as a deterrent. 2 years on, not a single migrant, lots of Home Secretaries, but the government does believe that finally, they are within touching distance of getting people on flights to Rwanda. Of course, we don't know how they're going to get there because Rwandan Airlines doesn't want to take them. Our commercial airlines don't want what they see as the reputational damage. The RAF have got their own commitments. That's one of the details. We're yet to hear how these people are going to get there, but it's looking hopeful at last for the government after 2 years.
Well, Catherine Forster, perhaps they'll sprout wings and flap them and make it there safely. Catherine Forster, thank you very much for joining us live from Downing Street. And joining me now is the former minister under David Cameron's cabinet, Norman Baker. Norm, welcome to the show. I mean, even I'm getting cynical about this, Norman. Now, 2 years later, 5 billion quid. Today, they think that the Rwanda scheme will cost over 5 years, £1 billion a year for 30,000 migrants, £150,000 a pop, and yet not a single person has taken off. How do you sum up the situation, Norm?
This is a ridiculous and a dangerous bill which will achieve nothing, and the government has been deeply stupid to have invested so much political capital in it. There were 55,000 asylum applications in the last 9 months of last year. The government is talking about 300 migrants going to Rwanda, and indeed, if that figure is even reached, because the Rwandan government got fed up and has disposed of some of the accommodation it was going to use for the migrants. So it isn't going to be any sort of deterrent whatsoever. It's going to cost a fortune. It's going to cost 1.8 million per applicant to be sent to Rwanda. And as Alex Carlisle has pointed out, it'd be cheaper to put them up in the Ritz full-time than to send them to Rwanda at that cost. It's also a dangerous bill because what the bill does is say that black is white, up is down, right is left, Rwanda is safe. Rwanda is not safe. It's a country where you can be imprisoned for being gay. It's a country which is involved in a civil war in East Congo. It's a country where dissent is not tolerated. And the government has also said that the courts cannot rule on this matter. The courts have been excluded from any consideration of this government bill, which is deeply undemocratic. If the government's recently had a definition of extremism of those who are threatening democracy, perhaps they ought to arrest themselves.
Norman, this bill might limp through, but do you expect a single migrant to ever get to Rwanda? Because surely, if it overcomes the Commons vote, it would then face attacks by lawyers, by NGOs, by charities, by the ECHR. It seems that the entire machine of the establishment will stop this no matter what. Do you think, as Christopher Hope has bettered with Rishi Sunak, a single pint of beer and not a single person will ever leave these shores to go to Rwanda?
Well, I think they might get a few off the ground. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how they're going to get there. As pointed out in your report, none of the airlines want to touch us with a barge pole. But even if they get 300 over to Rwanda, what does that achieve? It's nothing. It's a microscopic amount of the refugees who are coming here. It really is quite pointless, and the government has been deeply stupid to invest in its political capital in this way. When people are more concerned about the NHS, about the state of the economy, really this is the government's last rights on this bill. They can get it through, but it'll achieve nothing.
OK, Norman Baker, thank you for joining us. As ever, frank and forthright shooting from the hip. Love it. Thanks for joining us, mate. There's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. And Rishi Sunak, as I said, is about to make a statement about Iran's drone and missile attack on Israel in the House of Commons. You can see pictures there of that debate heating up, and we'll bring that to you live, of course, as Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, and Sir Keir Starmer gives his response. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories. Donald Trump has lost a second bid to remove the judge in his hush money criminal trial. He claimed Justice Juan Merchan had a conflict of interest because his daughter works for a political consulting firm with Democratic clients. The former US president has been charged in connection to a case involving a payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels. He faces a maximum of 4 years in prison per charge if convicted. However, it's more likely he'd avoid a jail term and be fined instead. The Prime Minister is due to make a statement in the Commons shortly on the escalating tensions in the Middle East following Iran's drone and missile strike against Israel at the weekend. He has just arrived to the House of Commons. We'll be hearing from him shortly. The government has confirmed the RAF helped shoot down a number of drones. The UK has also rejected a claim by Tehran that it gave advance notice of the attack. 534 people were intercepted in the English Channel yesterday, making it the highest number of crossings in a single day so far this year. It means the total number of small boat arrivals this year now stands at a provisional total of 6,265. It comes as the government's flagship Rwanda policy returns to Parliament, with MPs due to debate the latest amendments by peers. 3 people have died and another's in a critical condition following a car crash in North London. It happened near the Staples Corner retail park just before midnight. 5 men, all thought to be in their early 20s, were in one car. Police do not believe any other vehicles were involved in the incident. 3 people were pronounced dead and 2 others were taken to hospital. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2462 and €1.1722. The price of gold is £1,872.76 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,982 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, there's a new way to get in touch with us here at GB News, and here's Bev Turner with all the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
And we're crossing to the Commons now. Live pictures on your screen. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is about to stand up and address the nation on the escalating situation between Israel and Iran in the Middle East. Lord David Cameron said the attack was a failure, urging Israel to think with its head as well as its heart. Joe Biden advising Israel to take the win. We're expecting Rishi Sunak to stand up shortly, followed by the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer. That's all coming up. Don't go anywhere.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Warwickshire. Firstly, the southbound M6 junction to Coventry down towards Rugby Junction 1. The inside lane is coned off there. A collision is causing queues. Now, the M48-7 bridge, that's the original crossing between Wales and England, that remains closed due to strong winds. Southbound M1 still closed. Hemel Hempstead to Junction 8 down towards the M25 at 6.
And let's cross now live to the House of Commons, where Rishi Sunak is making a statement following Iran's drone and missile attack on Israel.
Mr. Speaker, on Saturday evening, Iran sought to plunge the Middle East into a new crisis. They launched a barrage of missiles and attack drones over Iraq and Jordan and towards Israel. The scale of the attack and the fact that it was targeted directly at Israel are without precedent. It was a reckless and dangerous escalation. If it had succeeded, the fallout for regional security and the toll on Israeli citizens would have been catastrophic. But, Mr. Speaker, it did not succeed. In support of Israel's own defensive action, the United Kingdom joined a US-led international effort, along with France and partners in the region, which intercepted almost all of the missiles, saving lives in Israel and its neighbours. We sent additional RAF Typhoons to the region as part of our existing operations against Daesh in Iraq and Syria. And I can confirm our forces destroyed a number of Iranian drones. We also provided important intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance support for our partners. Mr. Speaker, our pilots put themselves in harm's way to protect the innocent and preserve peace and stability. I spoke to the RAF earlier today. They are the best of the best, and I know the whole House will join me in expressing our gratitude. Mr. Speaker, with this attack, Iran has once again shown its true colours. They are intent on sowing chaos in their own backyard, on further destabilising the Middle East. Our aim is to support stability and security, because it is right for the region, and because, although the Middle East is thousands of miles away, it has a direct effect on our security and prosperity at home. So we are working urgently with our allies to de-escalate the situation and prevent further bloodshed. We want to see calmer heads prevail, and we are directing all our diplomatic efforts to that end. Yesterday, I spoke to my fellow G7 leaders. We are united in our condemnation of this attack. We discussed further potential diplomatic measures which we will be working together to coordinate in the coming days. I will also shortly be speaking to Prime Minister Netanyahu to express our solidarity with Israel in the face of this attack and to discuss how we can prevent further escalation. All sides must show restraint. Mr. Speaker, our action reflects our wider strategy in the Middle East, which I have set out in this House previously. I believe there are 3 vital steps to put the region onto a better path. First, we must uphold regional security against hostile actors, including in the Red Sea, and we must ensure Israel's security. That is non-negotiable. It is a fundamental condition for peace in the region. In the face of threats like we saw this weekend, Israel has our full support. Second, we must invest more deeply in the two-state solution. That is what we have been doing over the past 6 months, including working closely with the Palestinian Authority, so that when the time comes, they can provide more effective governance for Gaza and the West Bank. Mr. Speaker, it is significant that other regional partners actually helped to prevent a much worse attack over the weekend. It reminds us how important the attempts to normalise relations between Israel and its neighbours really are, and it holds out precious hope for the region. Third, Mr. Speaker, the conflict in Gaza must end. Hamas, which is backed by Iran, started this war. They wanted not just to kill and murder, but to destabilise the whole region. This weekend, they rejected the latest hostage deal, which offered a road to a ceasefire. It is Israel's right, and indeed its duty, to defeat the threat from Hamas terrorists and defend its security. And I want to be clear, nothing that has happened over the last 48 hours affects our position on Gaza. The appalling toll on civilians continues to grow. The hunger, the desperation, the loss of life on an awful scale. The whole country wants to see an end to the bloodshed and to see more humanitarian support going in. The recent increase in aid flows is positive, but it is still not enough. We need to see new crossings open for longer to get in vital supplies. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the 3 British aid workers who were killed in Gaza: John Chapman, James Kirby, and James Henderson. They were heroes. The children of Gaza, who they were risking their lives to feed, need a humanitarian pause immediately, leading to a long-term sustainable ceasefire. That is the fastest way to get hostages out and aid in, and to stop the fighting. Israelis and Palestinians alike deserve to live in peace, dignity, and security, and so do people across the entire region. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, Saturday's attack was the act not of a people, but of a despotic regime. And it is emblematic of the dangers that we face today. The links between such regimes are growing. Tel Aviv was not the only target of Iranian drones on Saturday. Putin was also launching them at Kyiv and Kharkiv. And who was the sole voice speaking up for Iran yesterday, seeking to justify their actions? Russia. The threats to stability are growing, not just in the Middle East, but everywhere. And we are meeting those threats time after time. with British forces at the forefront. It's why our pilots were in action this weekend. It's why they have been policing the skies above Iraq and Syria for a decade. It's why our sailors are defending the freedom of navigation in the Red Sea against the reckless attacks of the Iran-backed Houthi militia. It's why our soldiers are on the ground in Kosovo, Estonia, Poland, and more. And it's why we have led the way in backing Ukraine and will continue to back them for as long as it takes. When adversaries like Russia or Iran threaten peace and prosperity, we will always stand in their way, ready to defend our values and our interests, shoulder to shoulder with our friends and our allies. And I commend this statement to the House.
Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for advance copy of his statement and for the regular briefings on the developing situation in the Middle East. I also thank the Prime Minister for his warm tribute to your father, Mr. Speaker, Doug Hoyle, a great servant of our party, respected by all who knew him. I also join the Prime Minister in offering our solidarity with the victims of the horrific attack in Sydney and in recognising the heroism of the 3 British aid workers killed in Gaza while working for World Kitchen. Turning to the events of this weekend, we support the defensive action taken by the UK over the weekend alongside our international allies against the Iranian attacks on Israel, and we welcome the Prime Minister's call for restraint. Once again, we all salute the professionalism and bravery of our armed forces. We also support the RAF planes being sent to the region to bolster Operation Shader. Their efforts are vital for a safer world. Mr. Speaker, there can be no doubt that the attack perpetrated by Iranian forces this weekend has left the world a more dangerous place. It targeted innocent civilians with a clear intent to destabilise the region. It must be wholly condemned by all. But, Mr. Speaker, let us also be clear. A full-scale conflict in the Middle East is in no one's interests. It is a path that can only lead to more bloodshed, more instability, and the unleashing of forces that are beyond the ability of anyone to control. Mr. Speaker, the combined defensive action this weekend was a success, and because of that, lives were saved. As a result, escalation is not inevitable. In repelling the attack, Israel showed strength and courage. It must now show the same strength and courage to de-escalate. That has to be the primary objective. And, Mr. Speaker, that is the responsibility of all sides and every partner. We must be resolute and united in our support for the collective security of Israel, Jordan, and other partners in the region. But tensions remain very high. We must proceed calmly, carefully, and with restraint. Because if diplomacy takes centre stage, and it must, then we also need to be clear. Diplomatic premises should not be targeted and attacked. That is a point of principle. But as the condemnation from our G7 allies rightly notes, Iran's response this weekend was unprecedented, a further step towards the destabilisation of the region and the risk of escalation. And nobody in this House should be or is under any illusion. This is a regime that sponsors terror across the Middle East and beyond, that murders and represses its own people and supports Putin's war efforts in Ukraine. So can the Prime Minister update the House on any new steps he's taking with our international partners to pursue sanctions against the regime? And can he clarify what steps he's taking to limit the power of the Revolutionary Guard to glorify terrorism here in the UK? Mr. Speaker, whilst there is no justification for Iran's actions, we cannot be naive to the fact that one of the drivers of tension in the region is the ongoing war in Gaza. 6 months on from the horrific Hamas terror attack, Hostages remain separated from their families. Thousands of innocent Palestinians have been killed. And now more than 1 million people face the imminent threat of famine. So I urge the government again to use every ounce of diplomatic leverage that we have to make sure aid to Gaza is unimpeded and drastically scaled up. Alongside that, we reiterate our call for an immediate ceasefire, for Hamas to release hostages, and for a return to a diplomatic process that can rekindle the hope of a two-state solution. Mr. Speaker, it is right that we condemn Iran's action. It is right that we work with others to defend the security of our allies. And it is right that we seek the end of conflict in Gaza. But this is a moment for restraint, because escalation will only lead to further destruction. And for the sake of all those still caught in the horror and violence, that must be avoided. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the right honourable gentleman for his support of the government's actions. With regard to what might happen going forward, ultimately Israel has a right to self-defence, as any state does, and the G7 leaders spoke yesterday and unequivocally condemned Iran's attack and expressed full solidarity and support to Israel and its people. But as the Foreign Secretary said this morning, this is a time to be smart as well as tough. Israel has successfully repelled, incredibly successfully repelled, the Iranian attack, and Iran is even more isolated on the world stage. And as others have said, we would urge them to take the win at this point. We want to avoid further escalation and bloodshed. He's right that it would be deeply destabilising for the region and risk more lives, and all our diplomatics at this point will be geared towards that goal in partnership with our allies. Next, just turning to Iran. The behaviour of the Iranian regime, as I've said previously, including the actions of the IRGC, poses a significant threat to the safety and security of the UK and our allies. And yesterday at the G7, we agreed to work together on further measures to counter the Iranian regime and its proxies. It was agreed that we should coordinate those actions, and that work is now underway. And obviously, at the appropriate time, either I or ministers will update the House. We have already sanctioned, as he will know, over 400 Iranian individuals, including the IRGC in its entirety. We have a new sanctions regime to enable us to, well, gives us more extensive powers to designate sanctions that we put in place at the end of last year. And of course, the National Security Act, it creates new offences for espionage and foreign interference, and means that our security services have the powers that they need to deter, disrupt, and detect threats of a more modern nature from states like Iran. And lastly, with regard to diplomacy for Israel and the region, we're absolutely committed to a two-state solution and working very hard, using all our efforts to bring that about, particularly over the last few months, building up the capability, as I said, of the Palestinian Authority so that they have the technical and administrative capability that is necessary when the moment comes for them to provide effective governance in the West Bank and Gaza. It is absolutely my view and the government's view that Israelis and Palestinians should have the opportunity to live side by side in peace, with security, dignity and opportunity, and I'm proud of the role that the United Kingdom is playing.
Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Alicia Cairns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My condolences on the loss of your father.
OK, and that was Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister, speaking in the House of Commons on the escalating situation between Iran and Israel. And Sir Keir Starmer responded. I'm joined now by our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, Sir Keir Starmer saying this is a moment for restraint. Rishi Sunak also saying we do not want any more bloodshed, although he did add he stands in solidarity with Israel. And he said it is Israel's right, its duty to destroy Hamas.
Yes, and he said that as far as Israel was concerned, that of course that right to defend itself and the UK's commitment to the defence of Israel was absolute. But he is echoing Keir Starmer in saying that he wants Israel to show restraint here, to show that it is smart as well as tough, to, in Rishi Sunak's words, echoing those of President Joe Biden, to take the win. Now, I'm not sure that Israel see the actions that happened over the weekend as a win as such. This was a state-on-state attack, an attack on their sovereign territory by Iran from its own territory for the very first time, and an attack that involved the launching of hundreds of drones and missiles. Yes, thanks to the cooperation of allies like the US, the UK, Jordan and even Saudi Arabia, they were able to destroy the vast majority of these munitions before they reached Israel. The real concern that Israel has is this sets a precedent. What you've had up until now is proxies in the region, in southern Lebanon in the form of Hezbollah, of course Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, other groups in Syria and Iraq that have launched attacks on Israel, but never before has Iran launched attacks from its own soil. Israel is very concerned, now that that Rubicon has been crossed, that in future crises, then this could well be the response from Iran. So factoring that in, that's where they are now in terms of where the war cabinet is. They will respond. Quite what that response will be, we're not sure. But clearly, the allies of Israel want it to be a measured response and an intelligent response that perhaps stops this downward escalation into a very violent regional conflict.
Thank you, Mark White, for that summary. And Rishi Sunak also paid special respect to RAF pilots who were involved in that conflict. He said they are the best of the best. Our aim is to support stability across the region. We'll have more of that story after this, but first it's time for your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, welcome to the Met Office weather forecast. It's going to be a blustery afternoon with further heavy showers coming through. They do ease later on with the chance of clear spells developing overnight, but generally low pressure is in charge of our forecast for the rest of the day. Low pressure sitting in the North Sea, bringing a gusty and cold northwesterly wind with it. These showers are going to be lively where they occur. Hail and thunder a possibility. They do tend to ease overnight with clear spells developing. The showers becoming more confined to eastern parts along with the gusty wind, and with plenty of clear spells towards western and northwestern parts, temperatures will dip into the mid-single figures, perhaps a bit lower in one or two shelter spots. So a touch of ground frost here and there as we begin Tuesday, but otherwise plenty of bright weather first thing. Still be some cloud and showers along the east coast, and further showers will bubble up as the day gets going elsewhere. But there'll be fewer showers and there'll be more sunshine compared with today, with temperatures responding a little better. 14, perhaps 15 in the south, 11 or 12 further north, and with lighter winds feeling more pleasant. Wednesday starts off with a frost in places, clear spells first thing. Plenty of sunshine through the morning though, although there will be some cloudier skies returning to Northern Ireland later and a few showers elsewhere. All in all, it's looking like an improved picture as we end the week. Higher pressure, drier weather.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Julian Brett. In Buckinghamshire, the clockwise M25. Now, a car has caught fire at junction 16 for the M40. The exit slip to the northbound M40 is partially blocked at the moment. Those queues are back to junction 15 for the M4. In Hertfordshire, the southbound M1 remains partially blocked as recovery work takes place after a car hit a bridge. That's from junction 8 for Hemel Hempstead to junction 6 for North Watford. Queues back to junction 9 for Redbourne. In Monmouthshire, the M48 Severn Bridge has had to be closed in both directions because of today's very strong winds. That's from junction 2 for Chepstow to 1 for Ost. And in Northamptonshire, the northbound M1 has a lane blocked by a broken down car. That's slowing things down from junction 16 for Daventry to 17 for Dunchurch and Coventry. There's more in 30 minutes.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and a happy Monday to you. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, as the world stares down the barrel of all-out war in the Middle East, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has just announced with the Israeli Prime Minister later today he will speak with him and insists that Western allies should de-escalate the situation in the Middle East. Now, it's a busy day for the Prime Minister as his flagship Rwanda bill once again ping-pongs back to the House of Commons. The day after, a record 534 arrived by small boats. Will a single flight ever leave for Rwanda? Next up, as Donald Trump's trial for alleged hush money paid to porn star Stormy Daniels kicks off in New York, we'll ask, can the former president ever get a fair trial? And the RAC is imploring the government to scrap all smart motorways after more than 50 deaths on them. And we'll speak to a campaigner whose husband was killed on a smart motorway by a lorry in 2019. And that's all coming up between now and 6 o'clock. Welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure to have your company. Well, we've just heard from the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, in the House of Commons. Both have spoken on the escalating situation between Iran and Israel and the Middle East, both calling for calm heads, calling for a considered response. We'll have full analysis on that. But I want to hear from you. What do you think about it? Should we be getting dragged into yet another war in a faraway land? What could it mean for soaring oil prices, petrol prices, the pounds and the pence in your pocket? These wars always have an impact. But can we just let Iran and the Ayatollah wreak havoc across the region? And a report out today saying Islamic foundations within London doing their best to destabilise events on British soil. They were behind the protests outside the Batley Grammar School 3 years on. That teacher is still in hiding. Can we afford to ignore this, or should we ignore it at our peril? Get in touch. There's a new way to do that. Send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/you'll say. Log on, you'll see my mush. Leave comments if you're polite, and I'll read a few out before the end of the show. But first, let's tear into your news headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom this afternoon is that the Prime Minister has just said he's going to be urging his Israeli counterpart to show restraint following Iran's drone and missile attack. Rishi Sunak told the Commons he's going to be speaking to Benjamin Netanyahu later to reiterate the UK's solidarity with the country and to discuss how to prevent further escalation of violence in the region. If you're watching on television, you can see Suella Braverman there in the House of Commons speaking about this at the moment. The Prime Minister earlier on went on to say that Iran is intent on sowing chaos in its own backyard, further destabilising the Middle East.
Mr. Speaker, with this attack, Iran has once again shown its true colours. They are intent on sowing chaos in their own backyard, on further destabilising the Middle East. Our aim is to support stability and security, because it is right for the region, and because, although the Middle East is thousands of miles away, it has a direct effect on our security and prosperity at home. So we are working urgently with our allies to de-escalate the situation and prevent further bloodshed.
Well, that was Rishi Sunak a short time ago. Also in the Commons, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, had his say. He said Iran's attack has left the world a more dangerous place.
Mr. Speaker, there can be no doubt that the attack perpetrated by Iranian forces this weekend has left the world a more dangerous place. It targeted innocent civilians with a clear intent to destabilise the region. It must be wholly condemned by all. But, Mr. Speaker, let us also be clear. A full-scale conflict in the Middle East is in no one's interests.
Now, in other news today, 534 migrants were intercepted while crossing the English Channel yesterday, making it the highest number of crossings on a single day so far this year. That means the total number of small boat arrivals this year stands at a provisional total of 6,625. And that comes as the government's flagship Rwanda policy returns to Parliament, with MPs due to debate the latest amendments by peers. In the United States, Donald Trump has lost a second bid to remove the judge in his so-called hush money criminal trial. He's claimed the presiding judge had a conflict of interest because his daughter works for a political consulting firm with Democratic clients. The former US president has been charged in connection with a case involving payment to an adult film star. If convicted, he'd face a maximum of 4 years in prison per charge. But it's more likely he'll avoid a jail term and be fined instead. Arriving at the court a little while ago, he described the start of the trial as an assault on America.
Political persecution. This is a persecution like never before. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And again, it's a case that should have never been brought. It's an assault on America. And that's why I'm very proud to be here. This is an assault on our country. And it's a country that's failing. It's a country that's run by an incompetent man who's very much involved in this case. This is really an attack on a political opponent. That's all it is.
Donald Trump. Now, 3 people have died and another is in a critical condition following a car crash in North London. It happened near the Brent Cross shopping centre just before midnight. 5 men, all thought to be in their early 20s, were in one car. Police don't believe any other vehicles were involved in that incident. 3 people pronounced dead at the scene, 2 others taken to hospital. The 5th man's injuries, we understand, not life-threatening. Now, 2 men have been jailed after police found cocaine hidden inside blocks of cheese. Just over £17 million worth of cocaine, in fact, was seized from inside those blocks of cheese after officers raided a unit in Blackburn in Lancashire last May. Well, 46-year-old Salim Chowdhury has been jailed for 27.5 years for admitting conspiracy to supply cocaine and money laundering, whilst Redaul Mohabbath has been jailed for 16 years. In Australia, the father of the man who fatally stabbed 6 people at a shopping centre in Sydney has apologised for his son's actions. Joel Cauchi killed 5 women and a male security guard at the weekend. Police say they're investigating whether he was specifically targeting female victims. They believe the 44-year-old suffered from schizophrenia and used drugs, including meth and psychedelic drugs as well. Andrew Cauchi says his son was a very sick boy.
I'm extremely sorry. I'm heartbroken for you. Look, this is so horrendous that I can't even explain it. You're trying to give you an intelligent conversation. I can't do it because I'm just devastated. I love my son. I made myself a servant to my son when I found out he had a mental illness. I became his servant. I did everything because I love that boy.
The father of Joel Cauchi speaking there. Now, in the United States, the FBI has confirmed it is on board the cargo ship carrying out a criminal investigation into the Baltimore bridge collapse, which happened last month. 6 people were killed when a cargo ship lost power and hit the structure, sending it tumbling into the water below like a pack of cards. The Washington Post is saying the federal criminal investigation will partly focus on whether or not the crew knew the vessel did have serious problems with its systems before it left port. Meanwhile, work to clear the wreck and restore traffic through one of the busiest shipping lanes in the eastern United States is ongoing. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan that QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, of course, there's only one place to start this hour, and there's a nervous wait for Israel to make its next move after Iran's attack on Saturday night. And Iran, of course, sent around 350 drones and missiles at Israel, and a small number was shot down by RAF jets. Now, Rishi Sunak said in a statement to MPs, Iran showed its true colours with the attack and that the UK was working with allies to de-escalate the situation.
It was a reckless and dangerous escalation. If it had succeeded, the fallout for regional security and the toll on Israeli citizens would have been catastrophic. Mr. Speaker, with this attack, Iran has once again shown its true colours. They are intent on sowing chaos in their own backyard, on further destabilising the Middle East. Our aim is to support stability and security, because it is right for the region, and because, although the Middle East is thousands of miles away, it has a direct effect on our security and prosperity at home. So we are working urgently with our allies to de-escalate the situation and prevent further bloodshed.
Well, a short while ago, in response in the Commons, Keir Starmer said a full-blown conflict in the Middle East is in no one's interests.
We support the defensive action taken by the UK over the weekend alongside our international allies against the Iranian attacks on Israel. And we welcome the Prime Minister's call for restraint. Once again, we all salute the professionalism and bravery of our armed forces. A full-scale conflict in the Middle East is in no one's interests. It is a path that can only lead to more bloodshed, more instability, and the unleashing of forces that are beyond the ability of anyone to control.
Well, I'm joined now by our Homeland Security Editor, Mark White. So, Mark, it seems some political unity today. Our aim is to support stability. We want to see calmer heads prevail. That was Rishi Sunak, countered by Sir Keir Starmer, who said this is a moment for restraint.
Yeah, both of them pretty much united in that response on Israel, really calling on Israel to be restrained in the response that it now comes up with. And we know, of course, that this afternoon the Israeli War Cabinet has been meeting for a second day. Within that cabinet, there are splits. There are those that want Israel to go in hard against Iran. There are others that support, to an extent, what is being said by Joe Biden of the US, that was echoed there again by Rishi Sunak in the comments, which is take the wins. The allies here in the form of the US, the UK, we had Jordan, Saudi Arabia, France, all stepping in to ensure that those hundreds of missiles and drones did not reach, for the most part, Israeli airspace, and then try to come up with a response, knowing that Israel will have to respond, that will be intelligent and that will not escalate the situation further.
OK, Mark White, thank you for joining us with that summary there. And I'm joined now in the studio by Foreign Affairs and Defence Analyst James Marlowe. James, welcome to the studio. I was struck by different messages coming out from Rishi Sunak there. Because on the one hand, he was saying we need to have calm heads. We need to go for a ceasefire. So Keir Starmer saying this is the moment for restraint. But Rishi Sunak was saying that Hamas, which is backed by Iran, they started this war. It is Israel's right, its duty to destroy Hamas. And then he points out Hamas rejected another ceasefire yesterday. Why should Israel exercise restraint? From the one hand, they have the duty to wipe out Hamas. Why should they show restraint? Everybody seems to be telling Israel to calm down. I wonder if they'd do the same if their nation were attacked.
And it's not just you, Martin, who has that question mark. It's actually 90% plus of the Israelis, plus a huge amount of people across the world who are wondering how you actually do this. President Biden says right now it's a win situation. Lord Cameron says the same thing. It's a win situation. Take the win and walk away from the table. But how do you do that when you're actually, at this time, fighting a war? One of the largest wars that has taken place in the Middle East for many, many years. 6 months, in fact, today is 192 days that the October the 7th attacks occurred inside of Israel. 133 hostages still being held somewhere in Gaza, probably in the south, probably in Rafah. You've still got the red alert system going off. It went off just a short time ago before I came into the studio in the north of Israel. That means Hezbollah still firing their daily rockets into northern Israel from southern Lebanon. So the common denominator over here is the Shiites in Syria, Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, of course Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, all not just backed by Iran, but financed by Iran, trained by Iran, and also they're getting their weaponry from Iran. So that means that when you respond to the Houthis, when you respond to Hezbollah, which Israel is doing right now, when you respond to Hamas and Islamic Jihad and all the other Mujahideen groups inside of Gaza, you're responding, in effect, to Iran.
So in that sense, is there an argument, if you like, for going straight for the head of the snake? Why go for Hezbollah? Why go for Hamas if the source of the issue, the source of the funding, the source of the conflict, if you like, is Iran? There will be those within Israel who would like to strike on Iran directly. Would that be catastrophic for the area and for world peace?
I feel that this is, from the West point of view, right now in the UK, in Europe, and certainly right now in the United States, especially as you're heading towards a November the 5th general election inside of the States. Probably this election, my feeling is, towards the end of November. There's some European elections. You don't want to make this very volatile world even more volatile by actually doing what most people are thinking, but they cannot actually bring themselves to say those words. And that is that eventually the West is going to have a showdown, a real showdown, a proper war with Iran. Now, only 15% of the people, the Iranian people inside Iran, back the Revolutionary Guards, back the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, 15%. It could be during these strikes to Israel on Saturday night to feel a little bit more solidarity with your country, Iran, maybe another 5 to 10%. That brings it up to maybe 25%. The vast majority of Iranians literally loathe the Islamic Republic leadership, the regime. They want it gone. They're waiting for the West to step in. They're actually, believe it or not, the demonstrations on the streets, what we see in London, and some in New York and in Washington and perhaps in Manchester, are actually, they include a lot of Iranians who are completely opposed to the regime. So they're waiting for this opportunity because whilst this war has been taking place in Gaza, and then beforehand we focused very much on Ukraine and Russia, and then there was COVID, where's Iran? Iran has been flying under the radar, building up its enriching uranium, making more centrifuges. It's actually the JCPOA agreement, which Donald Trump was totally against, but for some reason Obama backed it. Well, there were many, many arguments against it, and I had many arguments. One of them was it never actually even talked about ballistic missiles from the Iran side. Now, those ballistic missiles could already hit Israel. They can hit anywhere in the Middle East. They can actually hit Eastern Europe. Those ballistic missiles which Iran are making right now are not for the Middle East, they're not for Israel. It's actually for Berlin, Paris, London and Washington, D.C. And once the worst starts to rise up and start talking about this and looking for that date to hit, we're in a 1930s moment right now. And this 1930s moment is that Chamberlain feeling is, let's not upset Adolf Hitler. Let's not push this. We just come out of a world war. We just don't want to do this.
Great. So fascinating stuff. Thanks for your input there. That's James Marlowe, Foreign Affairs and Defence Analyst. Thanks for joining us in the studio. Superb stuff. Now, Donald Trump has arrived at court in his historic hush money trial, and he becomes the first former US president to stand trial on criminal charges, accused of falsifying business records to disguise a payment made to porn star Stormy Daniels shortly before the 2016 election. And this could be the first of 4 criminal prosecutions against Trump to go to trial this year as he runs for a second term in the White House. Well, I'm joined from New York now by Matthew Schmitz, founder and editor of Compact. Welcome to the show, Matthew. So from over this side of the pond, there's only one question. Can Donald Trump possibly get a fair trial in New York?
I live in New York County, that's Manhattan, where the trial is taking place. 87% of my neighbors voted for Joseph Biden in the 2020 presidential election, so it's going to be hard for Trump to get a fair hearing. People know a lot about Trump, have their minds made up pretty strongly about him one way or the other. It's worth looking at the underlying matter here and the political background. This case was brought by Alvin Bragg, our elected prosecutor. When Bragg was elected, he promised to downgrade violent crimes like armed robbery from felonies to misdemeanors in certain cases. And as the DA of New York, he has set records for downgrading felonies to misdemeanors. What's notable here is that this is a case in which what should be at most a misdemeanor offense, falsifying business records with intent to defraud, was upgraded to a felony. That was done so that Bragg could get around the statute of limitations in New York. And it indicates, in the eyes of a lot of legal observers, a regrettable politicization of what should be a neutrally administered law.
And Matthew, Donald Trump, of course, maintains this is politically motivated. Is there any chance of a prosecution here, or is the process itself the punishment?
So, yeah, there is a good chance that Trump will be convicted. There are very strong legal arguments that could lead the jury to say, convict him only of the misdemeanor. If he's convicted only of a misdemeanor, then the conviction would be tossed out because of that statute of limitations. Trump is accused of using personal funds to pay what should have been a campaign expense, basically payments for Stormy Daniels, the porn star he's alleged to have had a relationship with, payments for her to sign a non-disclosure agreement, aka hush money. Of course, if Trump had used campaign funds to pay for this, he likely would have been charged by Democratic prosecutors with improper use of campaign funds. So he would have been skinned, one way or the other. It's a juicy underlying story. It's embarrassing for the candidate that he's entangled with this woman in some way and felt that there was something embarrassing enough there that he needed to conceal it. It kind of opens up his supporters, many of whom are religious and profess to uphold moral values. It opens them up to charges of hypocrisy or inconsistency. But legally, it's very, very thin.
OK, thank you very much for joining us. That's Matthew Smits, founder and editor of Compact. Thanks for joining us live from New York on the Trump trial. Ongoing, of course, we'll bring you the latest throughout the show. Now, the Rwanda bill is back in the House of Commons once again today. More than 6,000 people have now crossed the channel this year, including 534 just yesterday. Will those boats ever stop? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
You think this country needs new gas power stations? Apparently, this will all be about trying to get some form of energy security. Rishi Sunak has upset people today with this suggestion, people saying that actually this would do more damage to climate change than it would do good. Where are you on it, Richard?
I'll tell you exactly where. We need a lot more gas power stations and nuclear power stations because quite often the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Last week, we imported 16% of all our electricity because we haven't got enough capacity in the UK, and we're now totally over-reliant on renewables.
The part of the problem is the lack of storage capacity, which the government has finally got round to addressing. I think this as backup is actually quite a sensible idea. But they are not doing anything, as far as I can tell. At the moment, it will be retrofitted to have storage capability, which seems to be utterly bonkers. I mean, anyone who's got solar panels, you know very well you're storing up energy. So it's about storage as much as production. And they could have gone, 20 years ago, we could have had nuclear power. We could have done more. We haven't looked far enough ahead in the future, and we are in grave danger of making the same mistake. I mean, the other side of this is what is the difference going to be? Blackouts are, they're irritating and...
Irritating? It'd be disastrous. It would literally destroy our economy.
Well, they would be now, but, some of us remember 3-day weeks and things like that. And in fact, I grew up thinking that everybody had, at least a couple of days a week when they had to eat off a primer stove and things.
This is, again, I don't want to harp on, but this is one of the problems in the politics in our country, isn't it? So many politicians, they just think in election cycles. Absolutely. They just think, what can I do and say to get my own backside re-elected at the next general election? They're not always looking ahead at actually, politics aside, what is genuinely the best thing for this country.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Now, we've got some breaking news just coming in about Prince Harry's security arrangement when he visits the UK. And let's cross straight now to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, for the latest. Cameron, bring us up to speed.
Yeah, good afternoon, Martin. Well, Prince Harry, he has lost. The High Court has refused Prince Harry permission to appeal to the Court of Appeal in his case against the Home Office over his police protections. When he stood back as a working member of the royal family, the Home Office decided to change the level of police protection he got when he was in the UK. So he lost that in February. But now what the judge is saying is that Prince Harry's lawyers argued that Prince Harry should not have to pay £50,000 to 60% of the Home Office's legal costs. Now, Prince Harry's lawyers argued that. The judge partly agrees. Partly agrees. But the judge says that Prince Harry has to pay 90% of the Home Office's costs. But that means that 10% of the government's cost is still paid for, we think, by the taxpayer. What happens now? Prince Harry can directly appeal to the Court of Appeal over these court costs, over the judge's decision. But the judge, at the end of the day, has refused Prince Harry permission to appeal this particular challenge he had from the Home Office.
Thank you, Cameron Walker. Prince Harry loses again. Now, moving swiftly onwards, the Rwanda bill is back in the House of Commons today. MPs will discuss the flagship legislation after the government suffered a number of defeats in the House of Lords last month. Well, let's cross now to Downing Street to speak with our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Olivia, welcome to the show. Here we go again. It's Groundhog Day in Rwanda.
It is Groundhog Day, and this week really feels all a bit farcical. The Commons will be voting tonight on that Rwanda legislation. It's thought that they will vote down all of the amendments that the Lords put in just a month ago. The government, although sometimes it doesn't feel like it, does have a pretty big majority in the Commons. It will almost certainly vote down those amendments. Then tomorrow, the bill will go back to the Lords in what's known as parliamentary ping-pong. The Lords will likely amend the bill all over again. The following day, the Commons will vote down those amendments, and eventually, sooner or later, it's thought that the Lords will realise that it's a lost cause, and eventually peers will stop turning up to the upper house, and by probably the end of the week, that Rwanda legislation will be passed. Obviously, that is not by any means the end of the government's problems. The government is very much expecting legal challenges, but Rishi Sunak is still saying that he wants to keep to his timetable. He said that he wanted to see migrants leave for Rwanda by the spring. Well, it is very much spring here, but I think what he means by that is by the end of May. So that's the sort of timescale we're looking at. But MPs are still being pretty tight-lipped on how many migrants we can expect to see fly off.
OK, thank you for joining us live from Downing Street, Olivia Utley, and I'm joined in the studio for more reaction to this by the political correspondent at The Spectator, James Heal. James, more ping-pong than the Paris Olympics, and that's when the fun starts, really, isn't it? We're expecting this to limp through, maybe with tattered wings, which is a good metaphor, really, because no flights seem to be taking off any time soon. Do you think at that point, the entire establishment, the lawyers, the charities, the NGOs, they will go into overdrive to stop this?
We've already seen a lot of this in recent days, actually, and Care for Calais, for instance, have said they're going to hire dozens, if not hundreds, of legal volunteers. So every time you get someone who's going to be deported on this scheme taken to Rwanda, there'll be a case why they can't actually be sent there. You know, there'll be people looking into their paperwork, their history, etc., why they can't be sent there. And so really, we will then see at that point what the government's really made of in terms of their mettle. People within government I've been speaking to are saying, look, we haven't been, using this 6 months' time for nothing. The time of this building going through, we've been stress testing everything, making sure we've got no chinks in the armour. So they're confident of it, and we guess have to see you in court.
Got to be expensive. £5 billion in 5 years is the cost leaked by the Home Office today. And that's only for 30,000 migrants, an astronomical amount of money. You might as well send them on a world cruise.
But I think this is the key point, is that really everyone involved in this whole thing is like, well, what do you really do? They've been pulling out their hair, and they're saying, look, at least we've got a plan of deterrence. Labour hasn't got that. I had it put to me today by one Tory who said that, for instance, Labour want to do more work with the EU. Well, the EU's got even worse problems with us in the Mediterranean, for instance, if you look at the kind of number of small boats arriving there. So I'm not really sure what the kind of silver bullet to is. And what government is stressing today is that it's actually not just one sort of silver bullet, it's just one sort of weapon in the armoury as a whole.
And in fact, we saw a revolt last week around this precise issue, James, because, of course, the allocation of the illegals arriving into the European bloc is a part of a deal that was rejected by Poland and Hungary. Do you think that might be a part of what could happen if the Labour Party were to come into power? That cozying up to Brussels, that would mean taking more, wouldn't it?
Well, that would very much really likely involve. I certainly think that, because, I mean, you have to look at what we're going to be offering in return. If you want to have a deal, the obvious reason why we haven't seen much movement in the past few years on, the EU, for instance, in terms of migration, is because, frankly, the UK's got enough of a problem already. Do we want to take more of these? And I don't think the answer is yes.
James, our political editor Chris Hope has got a bet with the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, a single pint of beer, that not a single migrant will leave for Rwanda before the general election. Do you think that beer is safe?
I think that it's probably 52-48. It's probably safe.
A new Brexit. And on that point, what an ample and apt place to leave it. Thanks for joining us in the studio, political correspondent at The Spectator, James Hill. Always a pleasure. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, and oil prices could see a large spike if the conflict in the Middle East continues to escalate. And what impact could this have on the British economy and the pounds and the pence in your pocket? We'll have all that. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
The top stories this hour. The Prime Minister has said he'll urge his Israeli counterpart to show restraint following Iran's drone and missile attack on Israel. Rishi Sunak has been speaking in the Commons today, saying he's going to speak to Benjamin Netanyahu later and reiterate the UK's solidarity with Israel, but discuss how to prevent further escalation of violence in the Middle East. The Prime Minister saying Iran is intent on sowing chaos in his own backyard, further destabilising the Middle East. Here at home, 534 migrants were intercepted while crossing the English Channel yesterday. That makes it the highest number of crossings on a single day so far this year. It means the number of small boat arrivals this year now stands at a provisional total of 6,625. And it comes as the government's flagship Rwanda policy returns to Parliament, with MPs due to debate the latest amendments by peers. And within the last half an hour, we've heard a judge has ordered Prince Harry to pay 90% of Home Office legal costs after losing a case concerning his personal security. The Duke of Sussex had argued the court should reduce the amount he was required to pay by more than half. He launched legal action against the Home Office for cutting his police protection after he stopped being a full-time working member of the royal family. And in the States, Donald Trump has lost a second bid to remove the judge in his hush-money criminal trial after claiming there was a conflict of interest. The former US president has been charged in connection with a case which involves a payment to an adult film star. If convicted, he could face a maximum of 4 years in prison for each charge, but it's more likely he'll avoid a jail term and be fined instead. Those are the top stories. Do sign up for GB News Alerts. Scan that QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Great stuff. Now, plenty more to bring you in just a moment. But first, there's a new way to get in touch with us here at GB News. And here's Bev Turner with all the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Julian Brett. In Hertfordshire, the southbound M1 recovery work continues after a car hit a bridge. We've got the exit slip closed at junction 6A for the M25. The delays off the back of this are absolutely solid. Queues to junction 8 for Hemel Hempstead. Monmouthshire, the Severn bridge is closed in both directions because of today's very strong winds. That's from junction 2 for Chepstow to 1 for Ost. Looking to Gloucestershire now, the northbound M1. A police investigation is underway at junction 13 for Stroud. All traffic is being held at the moment. Into Somerset, the northbound M5, we've got a car fire here. The entry slip road at junction 19 for the A369 at Portishead remains closed for now, causing delays. There's more in half an hour.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
One more story in. Milton Keynes, absolute chaos in the city. 300-odd youths arrested or at least involved in a stampede. A stampede. Yeah, what's been going on?
A stampede through the...
There we are.
This is the video.
So this is a stampede through a shopping centre in Milton Keynes. I think, Amy, you live there, don't you? You live nearby.
For those on radio, we can see literally hundreds, scores of kids.
I think there are about 300 kids.
Are they in school uniform?
Yeah, quite
This is as they've broken up from school, presumably.
Security tried to intervene. They've been accused of being heavy-handed. But I think this speaks to the fact that the landscape of youth services has just been decimated and there's literally nothing for kids.
So hang on, whoa. You think that this has happened because social services have been diluted?
Youth services.
This is because there's no police around, there's no oversight, there's no deterrent, and 300 kids think that they can run through a shopping centre, frightening shoppers out of their lives.
Going to a shopping
Amy,
centre.
sorry, my kids would not be behaving like that because there's no ping pong available at the local
Aren't your kids like
youth
age
centre.
4 and 5? These are teenagers, and our teenagers are headed into a world where there are no leisure services. There are no
nothing to do with crime.
It has
If we up the ante
everything
on
to do-
basketball, it's not going to stop kids being stabbed on the street.
What creates antisocial behaviour is having nothing to do.
It's lack of discipline in the home, lack of discipline in the home, and lack of policing on the streets, and a judiciary and a penal system that is utterly liberal.
You're going right to the end of the line. What about the preventative measures?
What about the people that these people affect by running through a shopping centre and stampeding? When there's mothers with kids in prams frightened out of their lives, and we're worried about the social services
I'm
aspect
talking about
that's
carrot.
perhaps led
You're
to it.
talking about stick, right?
Yeah. So how long does your solution take to resolve it? Mine takes about 30 seconds. More police, bang them up. Yours...
Russell, should parents be fined?
More police, bang them up.
Absolutely, and the kids should be taken to task.
Welcome back. It's 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, oil prices surprisingly fell this morning despite Iran's reprisal attack on Israel over the weekend. But escalating geopolitical tensions are still threatening to push those oil prices up, with Brent crude now trading at a high average of around $90 per barrel, a surge which could drive up fuel and energy costs around the world once again. Well, join me now in the studio, it's Liam Halligan, GB News' economics and business editor with On the Money. Liam, always an absolute joy to have you here. You talk about this with huge authority. You always get it right. And the fact of the matter is, when these things kick off in lands that seem far away, inevitably, the impact is felt in British purses and pockets. Tell us why this time.
Well, let's be completely clear, Martin. The oil price has been cranking up quite a lot for quite a few months now, way before this attack on Israel by Iran, an unprecedented attack directly by Iran on Israel, not by proxies, not by Houthi rebels, not by Hezbollah in Lebanon, but directly from Iran. So we are in new territory. And what really happened over the weekend is, I've literally just been on the phone with somebody in Iran, a very highly regarded journalist in Iran. The regime is testing us out. The fact that they're attacking Israel, yet they did give some warning to limit the human collateral damage, though, of course, any damage on humankind is reprehensible. The oil price has come... it hasn't actually gone to the moon today because I think international decision makers can see, OK, this probably isn't going to escalate. Airlines are reinstating flights in Israeli airspace either today or tomorrow. No one's downplaying for a single second how important this is. I just called it unprecedented because it is. But the markets are understanding way before the media, as they always do. They're always ahead of the media. People betting real money with genuine insight and knowledge, and if they get it wrong, they get the sack. So it's a hard old world in financial markets in that sense. And they're thinking, actually, this probably isn't going to escalate, and that's why the oil price has behaved the way it was. But let's just have a quick look at a graphic here, because I can see you reaching for the graphic. With your eyes, you're saying to me, Liam, where's the graphic?
I crave them, Liam, I crave them.
And there it is. Oil turmoil. There you go. The headline writers earning their money there. So let's be clear, Martin. The oil price was at $91 a barrel as we went into this weekend. I wrote a column in the Sunday Telegraph yesterday, a column which I actually wrote on Friday before this attack, saying, crikey, oil's $91 a barrel. That's up 25% since mid-January. That's a 25% surge. In mid-January, the oil price was $73 a barrel. So imagine a 25% increase in the main, most important fuel in the world. Is it no wonder that petrol and diesel prices have been creeping up in the last few weeks? These high oil prices, they push up inflation, of course. We just had an inflation number out of America at the back end of last week. It went up from 3.2 to 3.5%. That means the Federal Reserve, US Central Bank, probably won't cut interest rates in the next month or two, which makes it, as I show in the graphic, harder for the Bank of England to cut interest rates anytime soon. Now, if the Bank of England cuts interest rates or raises interest rates or whatever it does, that's not going to impact Iranian-Israeli relations or global oil markets. Of course it's not. But it's just really difficult, sort of, in terms of credibility, for the central bank to be lowering interest rates when the oil price is going up, pushing headline inflation up rather than inflation coming down. Now, when the inflation number comes out on Wednesday for March, it will probably be, you know, quite low. It may even start with a 1. It might be 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, or it might be 2.5. It will certainly be a lot closer to the Bank of England's 2% target than it currently is, right? So that means that the Bank of England should then be able to raise interest, lower interest rates very, very soon. But it can't if the oil price is high. And that's the danger here for everyone in the UK, anyone with a mortgage, anyone with any kind of debt, anyone with savings who maybe wants to see interest rates stay high. What's happening between Iran and Israel, even though, without downplaying it for one moment, there does seem to be a sense that escalation's probably being contained, and that's demonstrated in the oil price. This still has the potential, if it does really deteriorate and there is an escalation, you're talking $100 oil, $120 oil, the sky's the limit if this escalates. But the signs are, for now, fingers and toes crossed, that it isn't going to escalate. And that's not me saying that. That's people in global oil markets who follow this stuff very, very closely, 24 hours a day.
Liam Halligan, as ever, complicated geopolitics, economics boiled down so even people like me can understand it. Fantastic stuff. Thanks for joining me.
I'll be testing you later.
You're the best, mate. Thank you. Now, don't miss out on your chance to win a 10 grand Greek cruise, a luxury travel bundle, and a whopping £10,000 in cash, tax-free. It's our biggest prize of the year so far, and here's how you could trouser it.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, coming up, is it time to scrap smart motorways? Well, I can't stand them myself, and now the RAC and campaigners are urging ministers to get rid of the road scheme, with linked to fatalities on the rise. Over 50 deaths today. Is it time to scrap the lot of them? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again, welcome to the Met Office weather forecast. It's going to be a blustery afternoon with further heavy showers coming through. They do ease later on with the chance of clear spells developing overnight, but generally low pressure is in charge of our forecast for the rest of the day. Low pressure sitting in the North Sea, bringing a gusty and cold northwesterly wind with it. These showers are going to be lively where they occur. Hail and thunder a possibility. They do tend to ease overnight with clear spells developing. The showers becoming more confined to eastern parts along with the gusty wind, and with plenty of clear spells towards western and northwestern parts, temperatures will dip into the mid-single figures, perhaps a bit lower in 1 or 2 shelter spots. So a touch of ground frost here and there as we begin Tuesday, but otherwise plenty of bright weather first thing. Still be some cloud and showers along the east coast, and further showers will bubble up as the day gets going elsewhere. But there'll be fewer showers and there'll be more sunshine compared with today, with temperatures responding a little better. 14, perhaps 15 in the south, 11 or 12 further north, and with lighter winds feeling more pleasant. Wednesday starts off with a frost in places, clear spells first thing. Plenty of sunshine through the morning though, although there will be some cloudier skies returning to Northern Ireland later and a few showers elsewhere. All in all, it's looking like an improved picture as we end the week. Higher pressure, drier weather.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camila Tomy, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camila Tomy Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Tonight on Farage, live at 7 p.m. on GB News, an exclusive interview with Liz Truss, and I promise you, she doesn't hold back.
I was the only Conservative in the room.
Yeah.
Welcome back. It's 4:48. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News with my name in front of me. Now, lots of you have been writing in, and I'll be reading out some of those comments shortly. But first, the RAC and road safety campaigners are urging ministers to scrap smart motorways and reinstate hard shoulders with concerns over their safety. Now, over 50 deaths are now being linked to the road scheme, and this comes a year after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak slashed all future smart motorway developments across the country. Well, I'm joined now by Claire Mercer, spokesperson for Smart Motorways Kill. Claire, welcome to the show. Now, I understand you tragically lost your husband on a smart motorway, and since then, you made it your life's mission to try and get rid of the things. Tell me why you think they need to go.
Because what started as a small incident that should have just been a bad start to the day turned into an absolute catastrophe that took the lives of 2 people, one of which was only 22 years old. And it was just a minor bump, but because there was no hard shoulder, so they couldn't get their vehicles out the live running lane, and there was nothing over the barrier except a 30-foot drop, they couldn't get out of, they couldn't go over the barrier, then a minor bump turned into a horrific catastrophe.
And many people, Claire, who've broken down on smart motorways. My missus broke down, the fuel injectors went, my missus and kids were in a car. I was petrified. Luckily, there was an ability for them to get over the barrier and get into a field, but the car took so long to get picked up, over 4 hours. They were freezing cold. How do you think these ideas ever got off the ground, Claire? In what world is removing a hard shoulder an essential safety feature? In what world did that ever get signed off?
I have no idea. I don't understand how it even got into the planning stage, because it should, you know, somebody's brought it up at a meeting somewhere and then people have just gone with it. It should have been shot down in the first mention. Because it's not just that you don't have anywhere to pull over, but how do emergency vehicles get through? I mean, even when it was too late for my husband and Alexandro, they were killed instantly. But they were killed at 8:15 in the morning, but their bodies were still on the road at 5 o'clock at night because they couldn't even get the coroner through with the coffins. So if you can't get a coroner through once it's too late, you can't get an ambulance through where every second counts, can you?
Well, Claire, it's a devastating story for you to relay, and I'm grateful for you doing that, and also, good on you for using that tragedy to spur you on to become a campaigner like this. How much would it mean to you if these motorways were struck off on a personal level? Would you feel like you'd really achieved something on behalf of your late husband and indeed all the other bereaving families who've lost loved ones to smart motorways?
Well, yes. I mean, it would just mean that Jason's death wasn't in complete vain. At least we'd managed to achieve something from that. I do get other families of people that are injured or, lost someone contacting me, but most of the time they're too broken by what has happened to reach out. But we do have a small group that I call the Broken Hearts Club. And between us, we keep fighting to make sure that no others do, because you mentioned Sunak's announcement last year. Well, I'm now in contact with 2 people that have been horrifically injured since his announcement. So, we've just got, Sunak's dismissing a year ago, oh yeah, we'll sort it. And in that time, 2 more people have been maimed and countless others killed. I mean, the killed figure is a lot more than 50. It was 53 that I knew of over 2 years ago. And that's why I took 53 coffins to Westminster. But it just keeps going up and up and up, and it's not going to improve. And these patch jobs that they keep applying, like extra refuge areas, they don't do anything. Your car's not going to break down where it's convenient, and it doesn't help the emergency vehicles get through either.
Now, Claire, we know that Rishi Sunak's team watch the show. What would you like to say to him?
Flick the switch. Just flick the switch. It would take a second. That's all you need to do. It doesn't cost hundreds of thousands. It doesn't cost the £980 million that they've allocated to keep compromising and sticking plaster jobs on these things. Just flick the switch and turn the first lane off now.
OK, Claire Mercer, thank you so much for joining us on the show and being so candid and open with your story, spokesperson for Smart Motorways Kill there. Now, I've had a load of emails from you guys. I'll get through a quick couple here. On Iran's attack on Israel, Nicholas says this: Israel could ask Rishi, you can't even protect your own borders. How can you protect and lecture us on ours? And David says there's a clear narrative going on here. Iran advertises that it will attack Israel with hundreds of missiles and drones, and the allies then shoot them all down, mostly before they even reach Israel. Next thing, Mr. Sunak is jumping up and telling us he saved the world from disaster. A bit of a cynical take there. I think Paula says this: Israel isn't fighting a country, they are fighting an ideology that's spread across the globe and even reached British streets. Keith says this: if we don't deal with Iran now, then we will have to deal with them later at a greater cost in life. Iran seems to be behind all of the trouble in the Middle East. Now, plenty to bring you up in the next hour. We're discussing more in Iran, of course. Rwanda, that's ping-ponged back to the House of Commons for a vote. Will a single flight ever get off the ground? And of course, Prince Harry, who's just lost a right of an appeal. He's lost a legal case. We'll have a full update on that. We've got tons to get through in the next hour. Before all of that, keep your views coming in. gbnews.com/you'll say. The show is as much yours as mine. But first, it's your weather, and it's Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, welcome to the Met Office weather forecast. It's going to be a blustery afternoon with further heavy showers coming through. They do ease later on with the chance of clear spells developing overnight, but generally low pressure is in charge of our forecast for the rest of the day. Low pressure sitting in the North Sea, bringing a gusty and cold northwesterly wind with it. These showers are going to be lively where they occur. Hail and thunder a possibility. They do tend to ease overnight with clear spells developing. The showers becoming more confined to eastern parts along with the gusty wind, and with plenty of clear spells towards western and northwestern parts, temperatures will dip into the mid-single figures, perhaps a bit lower in one or two shelter spots. So a touch of ground frost here and there as we begin Tuesday, but otherwise plenty of bright weather first thing. Still be some cloud and showers along the east coast, and further showers will bubble up as the day gets going elsewhere. But there'll be fewer showers and there'll be more sunshine compared with today, with temperatures responding a little better. 14, perhaps 15 in the south, 11 or 12 further north, and with lighter winds feeling more pleasant. Wednesday starts off with a frost in places, clear spells first thing. Plenty of sunshine through the morning though, although there will be some cloudier skies returning to Northern Ireland later and a few showers elsewhere. All in all, it's looking like an improved picture as we end the week. Higher pressure, drier weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Julian Brett. We're keeping an eye on Hertfordshire and the southbound M1 this afternoon. A car hit a bridge earlier on. The exit slip is closed at junction 6A for the M25 for recovery work. That's left a solid delay back to junction 8 for Hemel Hempstead and back onto surrounding routes. West Sussex, the southbound M23, we've got a lane blocked by a broken down car. That's from junction 9 for Gatwick Airport to 10 for Crawley. Monmouthshire, the M48 Severn bridge is closed both ways because of very strong winds from junction 2 for Chepstow to 1 for Ost. And in Gloucestershire, the M5 is blocked in both directions because of a police investigation. That's at junction 13 for the A419 at Stroud. Very long delays off the back of that both ways. There's more in half an hour.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel. A very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, as the world stares down the barrel of all-out war in the Middle East, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announces that he will speak with the Israeli Prime Minister later today and insists that Western allies to de-escalate the situation. And indeed, it's been a busy day for the Prime Minister as once again his Rwanda flagship poll, the bill, once again ping-pongs back to the House of Commons the day after a record 534 arrived by small boats. The big question is, will a single flight ever leave for Rwanda? And as Donald Trump's trial for alleged hush money paid to porn star Stormy Daniels kicks off in New York, we'll ask, can the former president ever get a fair trial? And there's news of a High Court defeat for Prince Harry, and that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always an absolute joy to have your company. So the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak spoke earlier about the escalating tensions in the Middle East, asking for calm heads, echoed by Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition. What does that mean for us here in Britain? Iran sent over 300 drones directly, an unprecedented attack onto Israel, and yet the world seems to be saying you have no real right to respond. Keep calm and carry on. I wonder, would they say the same thing if over 300 drones had come across their border? Should we get involved in this war in a faraway land, or can we not afford to get involved? After all, it will mean soaring oil prices, utility prices, and hitting us in our pockets here in Britain. Get in touch all the usual ways, and there's a new way. You can get in touch. You send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/you'll say. Log on, you'll see my mush, drop some comments, and I'll read out a bunch before the end of the show. But before all of that, it's time for your news headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom tonight is, as you've been hearing, the Prime Minister has been saying he's going to be urging his Israeli counterpart to show restraint following Iran's drone and missile attack on Israel. Rishi Sunak told the House of Commons this afternoon he's going to be speaking to Benjamin Netanyahu later on today. He'll be reiterating the UK's solidarity with Israel, but also discussing how to prevent an escalation of violence in the region. The Prime Minister says Iran is intent on sowing chaos in its own backyard, further destabilising the Middle East.
Mr. Speaker, with this attack, Iran has once again shown its true colours. They are intent on sowing chaos in their own backyard, on further destabilising the Middle East. Our aim is to support stability and security, because it is right for the region, and because, although the Middle East is thousands of miles away, it has a direct effect on our security and prosperity at home. So we are working urgently with our allies to de-escalate the situation and prevent further bloodshed.
Well, the Prime Minister's words were echoed by the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, there can be no doubt that the attack perpetrated by Iranian forces this weekend has left the world a more dangerous place. It targeted innocent civilians with a clear intent to destabilise the region. It must be wholly condemned by all. But, Mr. Speaker, let us also be clear. A full-scale conflict in the Middle East is in no one's interests.
Now, in other news today, 534 migrants were intercepted while crossing the English Channel yesterday, making it the highest number of crossings on a single day so far this year. That means the number of small boat arrivals this year now stands at a provisional total of 6,625. It comes as the government's flagship Rwanda policy returns to Parliament, with MPs due to debate the latest amendments by peers this evening. Now, a judge has ordered Prince Harry to pay 90% of Home Office legal costs after losing a case over his personal security. The Duke of Sussex had argued the court should reduce the amount he was required to pay by more than half. He launched legal action against the Home Office for cutting his police protection after he stopped being a full-time working member of the royal family. In the United States, Donald Trump has lost a second bid to remove the judge in his so-called hush money criminal trial. He claimed the presiding judge in the case had a conflict of interest because his daughter works for a political consulting firm with Democratic clients. The former US president has been charged in connection with a case involving a payment to an adult film star. Arriving at the court a little earlier on today, he described the start of the trial as an assault on America.
This is political persecution. This is a persecution like never before. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And again, it's a case that should have never been brought. It's an assault on America.
And staying in the United States, the FBI has confirmed it has opened a criminal investigation now into the Baltimore bridge collapse. 6 people were killed when a cargo ship lost power, veered out of control and hit the structure last month. A spokesperson says FBI agents have now been on board the vessel. Earlier, the Washington Post suggested the investigation will look at whether or not the crew knew the ship had serious problems with its systems before it left port. Here, 2 men have been jailed after police discovered cocaine hidden inside blocks of cheese. The Class A drugs with a street value of just over £17 million were seized after officers raided a unit in Blackburn in Lancashire last May, making the discovery. Salim Chowdhury has been jailed for 27.5 years for admitting conspiracy to supply cocaine as well as money laundering, while Radil Mohabbath was jailed for 16 years. That's the latest news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan that QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, there's only one story in town today, and Rishi Sunak will urge Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to show restraint in response to Iran's missile and drone barrage amid concerns the Middle East crisis could spiral out of control. And Iran sent around 350 drones and ballistic missiles at Israel, and a small number were shot down by RAF jets. And Mr Sunak told MPs that Iran showed its true colours with the attack and that the UK was working with allies to de-escalate the situation.
It was a reckless and dangerous escalation. If it had succeeded, the fallout for regional security and the toll on Israeli citizens would have been catastrophic. Mr Speaker, with this attack, Iran has once again shown its true colours. They are intent on sowing chaos in their own backyard, on further destabilising the Middle East. Our aim is to support stability and security, because it is right for the region and because, although the Middle East is thousands of miles away, it has a direct effect on our security and prosperity at home. So we are working urgently with our allies to de-escalate the situation and prevent further bloodshed.
In response, Keir Starmer said a full-blown conflict in the Middle East is in no one's interests. Well, joining me now is the CEO of the Jewish News Syndicate, Alex Trayman. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. So, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak a short while ago said in the House of Commons that it is Israel's right, its duty to destroy Hamas, while at the same time saying this is a moment for restraint. May I ask you, Alex, how does it feel when Israel is subjected to an unprecedented barrage of drones and missiles directly from Iran for the first time, not via proxies such as Hamas, Hezbollah or the Houthis, but a direct attack, and yet around the world people are asking you to restrain yourselves? How does that make you feel?
Well, I think that you said here that we've been attacked by these 3 proxies, which are all funded by Iran for months, for 6 months, relentless attacks from Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, all of which are being organized, orchestrated by Iran. And now Iran has shot ballistic missiles at us that reached Israel in 10 minutes time. You know, if even one of those had gotten through, it could have destroyed an entire city block. And they sent over 100 ballistic missiles and the largest amount of drone attacks ever in the history. People don't want a war, open war between Israel and Iran, but Iran continues to develop this axis of fire, axis of terror around Israel, and at the same time are developing nuclear weapons. There will be a war in the Middle East. Israel has the obligation to make sure that that war happens before Iran has deliverable nuclear weapons that it could put on top of those ballistic warheads.
And do you feel that this is the Iranians, the Ayatollah, testing the West? Do they sense weakness in the West? No desire, perhaps, for an enraged political escalation of this, because we have a presidential election in America. We have European-wide elections in a couple of months' time. We, of course, have a general election in Britain. And yet it constantly seems, Alex Trayman, that behind the scenes, it always seems to be Iran stoking up the tensions.
Absolutely. They're testing Israel's resolve right now, and they are testing the United States and the UK. If there's no response to this, Iran is going to be able to claim an incredible victory to its people, that Israel depends solely on the United States and the UK and others for its defense, and that they can bully and become the regional hegemony in this Middle Eastern region. They're certainly testing. If they get away with it, you can be assured that this will be the new status quo, and they will only continue to escalate attacks on Israel via proxies or directly in the future.
But Alex, a direct assault on Iran could lead to a full escalation across the region. What would you like to see happen?
Well, I mean, how are we not already in a full escalation? Again, we've seen the destabilization of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Gaza. Israel's being simultaneously being hit by 5 countries. We had missiles coming at us from Iraq the other night, in addition to Iran, from Yemen, from Lebanon at the same time. I mean, what will it take for the world to not think we're already in this full-fledged conflict? If we want to calm the tensions, great. Israel would be open to that. Have all the proxies stop firing on Israel, and then we can get to a situation of quiet in the region.
OK, superb. Thanks for joining us live from Jerusalem. And that was Alex Trayman, who's the CEO of the Jewish News Syndicate. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. And Sir Keir Starmer said in the House of Commons that a full-blown conflict in the Middle East is not in anyone's interests.
We support the defensive action taken by the UK over the weekend, alongside our international allies, against the Iranian attacks on Israel. And we welcome the Prime Minister's call for restraint. Once again, we all salute the professionalism and bravery of our armed forces. A full-scale conflict in the Middle East is in no one's interest. It is a path that can only lead to more bloodshed, more instability, and the unleashing of forces that are beyond the ability of anyone to control.
Well, I'm now joined by the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, Dr. Alan Mendoza. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mendoza. So we've just seen the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, calling for calm, sentiment echoed by the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer. And yet we spoke to a correspondent in Jerusalem there saying, what right does the West have Israel to tell it to calm down? An historic barrage of drones and ballistic missiles, and continually, it seems those pulling the levers of the tensions are the Iranians.
Well, yes. I mean, Iran is quite clearly the malefactor in the region. It is quite clearly the country that is causing disturbance, not just to its neighbours, but far beyond as well. And I have some sympathy, obviously, for the view from Jerusalem on this. Were the missile and drone barrage that Israel was subjected to on Saturday night coming to our shores, I can't believe for a moment that the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition would be suggesting that we sit back and do nothing. Now, obviously, we don't want to see war. There's no one who wants to see an escalation. But the reality is that for 75 years, the state of Israel has survived in a hostile environment by taking threats like Iran seriously rather than sitting back. And it's not going to do something different this time, particularly when that state has repeatedly called for its eradication.
And do you believe, Dr. Mendoza, that if we appear impotent to the Iranians over this, it could have an impact on British streets? A report out today by the Policy Exchange think tank showing that the Islamic Centre of England, based in London in Maida Vale, received £250,000 of COVID relief during the pandemic, despite having £4 million in the bank, calling itself the voice of Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah, on London's streets. We have to appear resolute and strong, do we not? Because this could have an impact on British streets.
Well, yes, the reality is, unfortunately, that Iran has established its agents on UK soil for some time. And we know this not simply because of linkages like the one you've just discussed, which have been known for some time, but we've also seen it in the assassination attempts against Iranian journalists in exile in London, the threats to Iranians in exile in London from other sources. So we know that Iran has got agents on the ground here. We know that Iran is looking to spread its malign influence in the UK as well and spark incidents here. So it makes perfect sense that we do start to crack down on Iran rather than appease it and allow it to continue down this dangerous path that the regime is taking it.
Concern to me, Dr. Mendoza, was that the Islamic Centre of England have been discovered as being behind the protests outside schools, particularly the Batley Grammar School protest. 3 years on, that teacher is still in hiding. Do you think it's acceptable that groups such as the Islamic Centre of England are even allowed to operate in Britain if they're behind such events such as that, where people's livelihoods are ended? They are forced into hiding via what appears to be backdoor blasphemy laws, and yet they still operate. Still no action is taken. Is that right?
Well, that particular institution has been under Charity Commission investigation for some time, ever since there was a vigil there for the murdered terrorist Qasem Soleimani. And so that put them firmly in the sight of the Charity Commission. But this new report will no doubt add fuel to the fire of the idea that we should not be allowing British charities that have foreign linkages in this way, that might even be dictated to by foreign powers, and then perhaps get out on the streets of the UK and try and disrupt British life. That is clearly something that should be cracked down on immediately. There are measures the government could take about charities like that. There are measures the government could take, like prescribing the IRGC straight away to send a message to Iran that enough is enough. We're not going to tolerate it any longer.
Great stuff. Thank you for joining us on the show, Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society. Thank you. Now, you get lots more of that story on our website, and thanks to you, GBNews.com is the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got breaking news and all of the brilliant analysis that you've come to expect from us here at GB News. So thank you very much. Now to a setback for Prince Harry, and his initial bid to bring an appeal has been refused after he lost a High Court challenge over a decision to change the level of his personal security when he visits the UK. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Cameron, a defeat for Prince Harry. Bring us up to speed.
Back slightly. In February, the court dismissed Prince Harry's claim against the Home Office over its decision not to provide him with the same degree of police protection when he is in the UK. And then the judge ordered Prince Harry to pay all of the Home Office's legal costs, which clearly comes from taxpayers' money, which was reported by The Telegraph with a Freedom of Information request to be more than £500,000. Now, Prince Harry's lawyers argued that Prince Harry should not have to pay between 50 and 60% of those legal costs. That is because, they say, the Home Office delayed providing the relevant information about the committee which makes the decision about Prince Harry's change in security arrangements, which meant that Prince Harry's team then had to refile claims and present more evidence, which became part of his challenge. The judge agrees that the Home Office's delay was, in his words, sanctionable, but did not agree that the cost should be slashed by more than half. So, in summary, Prince Harry is liable to pay 90% of the Home Office's costs, which the judge described to Peter Lane as modest, but still a significant reduction. So what happens now? Well, the High Court has refused Prince Harry, as you said in your introduction, permission to appeal to the Court of Appeal. So Prince Harry can either give up, or he can ask the Court of Appeal directly to give the green light for him to bring another challenge.
One to watch. Thank you, as ever, for bringing us up to speed. And that's GB News' royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Excellent as ever. Now, there's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win a Greek cruise, travel goodies, and a 10 grand tax-free cash bank balance boost. Who wouldn't say yes to that? Here's all the details that you need to enter.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now it's Groundhog Day once again because the Rwanda bill is back in the House of Commons once again today. Now more than 6,000 people have now crossed the channel this year, including an eye-watering record number, 534 just yesterday alone. Will we ever stop the boats? Will we ever get a single person to Rwanda? We'll discuss that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
I wonder, is this the fundamental distinction we need to make between Islam, which is a private religion people may practice freely amongst themselves, and Islamism? When you try and place those values upon other people, place that way of being, force it on people who don't want it.
Tom, I have been very much clear about this thing that Islam is a religion and people are free to follow that religion in the UK, in a free Western society. So we have no problem with people following their religion as long as it is not being imposed onto the wider society. And when you talk about drawing a distinction between Islam and Islamism, people like me, you and me, we are drawing that distinction. We're trying to maintain that distinction. But if you look at the commentator from the Muslim community, some commentator, they would like to blur this line and they would ask you, what is Islamism? Where does it exist? Sorry, it does exist. We see it. And the teacher, this incident is an epitome of that kind of, ideology being prevalent, in our society.
Khadija, do you worry that these views are typical for some sections of society? Do you think that there's a problem with some Muslim men, that they have perhaps views that we don't consider to be British values?
There are certain readings of religion which are misogynistic, which are discriminatory, which are homophobic. We need to be honest about it. We need to be calling it out whenever we hear these kind of views. It's been a long time that we are letting these kind of ideologies crawling in, spreading tentacles in British society, and we are just ignoring it in the name of respecting people's culture and religion. You are not suppressed in the UK.
Join me, Camila Tomy, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camila Tomy Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns, we'll be with you for every step of this journey. In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, later in the show, across live to the United States to get reaction to that Donald Trump trial, which is going on as we speak. Full reaction as it happens. But before that, the Rwanda bill is back in the House of Commons once again today. And MPs are discussing the flagship legislation after the government suffered a number of defeats in the House of Lords last month. Now, this comes as 534 migrants were intercepted while crossing the English Channel yesterday alone, the highest number of crossings on a single day so far this year, putting the total now to around about 6,250. Well, I'm joined now by our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. So, Chris, it's Groundhog Day. Round and round we go. Back the Rwanda bill comes. Will it limp through this time?
That's right. In my hand here are the 7 different changes to the Safety of Rwanda bill made by members of the House of Lords. In a few hours' time, members of Parliament, MPs, will probably vote to reject all 7 and send them back to the House of Commons. There has been some movement here, though. This is the second time it's happened. There's been some movement today from the government. Home Secretary James Cleverly has said the government will publish, if the Lords accept this, an annual report on the impact of the Rwanda bill on modern slavery and trafficking victims. That's to try and get Baroness Butler-Sloss to drop one of her amendments to this bill. Other amendments are looking from the Lords to trying to get the government to be forced to declare Rwanda unilaterally a safe country, have due regard for international law, and exempting Afghan illegally arrived migrants who come here from being flown to Rwanda if they've worked alongside the British. Many in the Labour Party thought that last one would have been supported by the government, but the government's holding firm on all 7, and the battle of wills goes on. This is called democracy. It's the elected MPs against the unelected peers. But the hope of the whips, the government whips at the moment, is that by Thursday all this will be settled and the Safety of Rwanda bill will be on the statute book, and then it's up to the courts, and lots of solicitors will be sharpening their quills, their pens, and getting ready to try and find ways to stop maybe as many as 150 illegally arrived migrants being sent to Rwanda for the first time. And that moment will be a moment of celebration for Conservatives and maybe some concern for Labour. Labour have said if they win power, they will axe the Rwanda plan, even if it's proving to be a success. So they don't want any, I doubt they don't want this to take off and to be a success. And the government, of course, is hoping they can fight the election, saying vote for us and for the Rwanda scheme, because the other lot will axe it.
Well, Christopher Hope, I admire your optimism. Will those sharpened quills be entering the hide of the Prime Minister? Will this be death by 1,000 paper cuts with echoes of Brexit? Chris Hope, thanks for joining us live from Westminster Hall. I'm joined now in the studio by the former Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Immigration, Kevin Foster. Kevin, welcome to the studio. Round and round we go. More ping-pong than the Paris Olympics. It feels like this bill has been back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Is this the end game? Are we finally going to get the Rwanda bill over the line?
Well, I hope so. I think what we'll see later today is a fairly firm majorities in the House of Commons to reject the Lords' amendments. And let's be clear what the Lords' amendments are about. These aren't about tweaking or refining or telling us something could be written slightly better. They're about trying to sabotage the whole plan by opening up routes to challenge, giving people a chance to claim things, to delay being moved. That's what a lot of this is about. So hopefully, colleagues, will have some firm majorities to send this back to the Lords, and then hopefully the peers will finally get the message that this is now time to let this go through and let the government get on with dealing with an issue that comes up on the doorsteps, that's in our mailbags, and that people want to see dealt with.
Forgive me for mentioning the B word, but this does feel like Brexit all over again. The Lords revolting, denying what the people want. And are we about to repeat history? In that sense, we're going to see the NGOs, the charities, the lawyers, the lovies, the Linekerrites, all the usual suspects. Are they going to go into overdrive and just do everything they can to frustrate this?
Well, I think you're right, Martin. We'll certainly see a range of people make all sorts of attempts to try and block this. One of the things they probably won't be doing is rushing to ring up the Home Office to volunteer to take part in the community sponsorship scheme to perhaps house someone themselves. But what we will see is them them is various attempts to reject. The difference with Brexit, the core difference this time around, is the government has a clear majority in the House of Commons that it can exercise to reject Lord's amendments and say to peers that this is the voice of the elected House, it's the voice of what the British people want to see done, and it is now time to let this bill pass.
OK, we may get the bill. Have we got the will? Have we got the will to get this done? Because all the tough talking so far has amounted to not a single sausage being flown to Rwanda, not a single asylum seeker. Nobody has gone there. Chris Hope, our political editor, has got a bet with Rishi Sunak, a single pint of beer, that nobody will be flown to Rwanda before the general election. What do you reckon?
Well, I think we can get this done, but you're absolutely right, Martin. Once we've got the legislation through, we now need to get on and deliver. And it is possible to get this plan underway. And what we need is, if I was still in the Home Office, I'd be looking at having, one, a pool of people ready to be processed, to go through decision-making, where we've already made a number of decisions, or perhaps around cases, to fence off attempts to suddenly remember things that they, funnily enough, didn't think to mention to the Home Office before until they knew they were getting on a plane to Rwanda. I'd be game planning, working through all the scenarios of actually getting the plane off the ground. It will be a big logistical operation to actually do it. You know, having done removal flights when I was in the Home Office, they're not easy things to do. This will be a lot of challenges around it. But yes, we can get this done, and we need to get on and deliver it. But of course, this is part of a wider solution to dealing with the boats in the Channel. You know, it still means we still need to be engaging with France about what more they could do in their waters to stop people crossing. But ultimately, this is about breaking the fundamental business model of the people traffickers, which is, if you get here, where can we then send you? If we can't send you back to France where you left, if we can't send you to your home country, because it's somewhere like Assad, Syria, or a country that refuses point blank to accept immigration returns, that we now have there is a safe third country we can send you to that's an expert in refugee resettlement, and those that breaks that fundamental business model that the small boats crisis is based on.
OK, Kevin Foster, I admire your optimism, and let's hope you get the result you want. But still, there's lots more to come between now and 6 o'clock, and I'll tell you why young people are saying Auf Wiedersehen to the UK and moving to the fatherland. They're clearing off to Germany. Why is that? But first, it's time for your latest news headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
Let's bring you up to date then with the latest top stories this hour. The Prime Minister says he's going to be urging his Israeli counterpart to show restraint following Iran's drone and missile attack on Israel. Rishi Sunak told the Commons he's going to be speaking with Benjamin Netanyahu later on today to reiterate both the UK's solidarity with the country, but also to discuss how to prevent further escalation of violence in the region. The Prime Minister saying Iran is intent on, quote, sowing chaos in its own backyard, further destabilising the Middle East. 534 migrants were intercepted while crossing the English Channel yesterday. That makes it the highest number of crossings on a single day so far this year. It also means the number of small boat arrivals in the UK now stands at a provisional total of 6,625. And it comes as the government's flagship Rwanda policy returns to Parliament once again, with MPs due to debate the latest amendments by peers. And a judge has ordered Prince Harry to pay 90% of Home Office legal costs after losing a case over his personal security. The Duke of Sussex had argued the court should reduce the amount he was required to pay by more than half. He launched legal action against the Home Office for cutting his police protection after being stopped from being a full-time working member of the royal family. And Donald Trump has lost a second bid to remove the judge in his so-called hush money criminal trial after claiming there was a conflict of interest. The former US president has been charged in connection with a case which involves a payment to an adult film star. If he's convicted, he could face prison sentences, but it's more likely he'd avoid a jail term and be fined instead. Those are the top stories. For the latest, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan that QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Checking on today's numbers for you, and the pound buying you $1.2464 and 1.1711 euros. The price of gold is £1,885 and 79 pence an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed the day today at 7,965 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly. Now, in a few minutes, I'll have news of Donald Trump's court case, which started today. But first, there's a new way to get in touch with us here at GB News. And here's Bev Turner with all the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner with your latest. Long queues continue heading north up the M6 through Warwickshire. Everybody has been squeezed onto the hard shoulder past the scene where a lorry's broken down. This is just after junction 4A where it meets the M42. Long queues back to junction 3A and back along the M42 as a result. On the M1 in Hertfordshire, the southbound exit is closed at the M25 for recovery work after a vehicle struck the bridge. And on the Essex stretch of the M25, long queues out of Essex towards Kent, heading clockwise after a lorry broke down just before the QE2 bridge. The M48-7 bridge is shut in England and Wales because of the strong winds. The M5 is blocked in Gloucestershire both ways at junction 13 at Stroud for a police investigation. And the M5 Avonmouth bridge, that's also blocked northbound. A lorry is on fire, causing long queues on the surrounding routes as a result. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I don't think you can go and watch a Shakespeare play unless you already know it. It's almost like you have to understand the story and the characters, and perhaps have even done a bit of reading into it. Because if you went completely blind, especially in today's world where we don't speak in that kind of way, it is, I think, probably a bit alienating.
But Dawn is saying it is alienating at the moment because of the lack of representation.
You know what, the actual phrasing they use, right, OK, the disproportionate representation propagated white, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender male narratives. I'm sure there's people sitting in a room going, what's the most ridiculous thing we can come up with today?
Yes.
But are really just chuck all these words at it, cisgender, and it's just insane. Of course, Shakespeare was what it was back in the day, and that's why it's mostly blokes and they're mostly white.
And lots of speculation that he was actually gay, isn't there? Because he never really saw Anne Hathaway very often and stayed away a lot of the time. I don't know, maybe he was a big
He might have been transgender for all I know. I mean, I don't...
Biggins, I'm looking at you.
No, I think you're right. I mean, you know, I think that goes for the profession too. I mean, I do think I mean, I remember seeing Macbeth in London with Judi Dench and Ian McKellen, and it was one of the most exciting evenings ever. And it was a cold night at the Donmar Theatre, outside and inside, and that gave it atmosphere. There are certain things that you go along and see something else, and you think, I'll walk out in the interval.
Yeah. Macbeth is a sexy play, though.
Let's talk about, there's so many. Can I live to be 100?
Oh, this is depressing.
I think it is depressing. I like to stay here now. I don't want to live to 100.
Don't say that.
I'm right behind you.
I don't even want to. My father died at 63. That'll be me gone this year.
Tonight on Farage, live at 7 p.m. on GB News, an exclusive interview with Liz Truss, and I promise you, she doesn't hold back.
I was the only Conservative in the room for many years, and it's not working. I loved arguing. I spent all my time arguing. I hate being told what to do.
Yeah, I know.
And I hate the government telling other people what to do.
And yes, she voted Remain, but says she liked the spirit of Brexit.
I like it.
Well, it was disruptive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the sort of popular sentiment of it and the fact that people were actually engaging in politics.
And on a major British institution, she says we should abolish it. Should we stick with the Supreme Court?
No, we should abolish it.
Should we?
We should abolish it.
Join me at 7 p.m. on GB News for Liz Truss Unfiltered.
Welcome back. It's 5:39. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, Donald Trump is currently on trial in New York and the first president to face criminal charges in his case involving hush money allegedly paid to Stormy Daniels. Well, when he arrived at court earlier, Trump said the case was an outrage and political persecution. We'd expect that, wouldn't you? Well, joining me now to share the details is GB News' America's video editor, Steve Edgington. Steve, welcome to the show, an absolute delight. So, it's certainly grabbed all the headlines. What's been happening today?
Trump came to court today basically so that they could start to pick the jury for the trial that's upcoming. Now, Trump faces several criminal trials. This is the only one that he'll likely face before the election in November. And what it's about is that basically Trump's campaign gave $130,000 to a porn star, Stormy Daniels, allegedly to cover up some kind of affair or something that happened in 2006. And Trump is now being put on trial in New York over allegations that basically his campaign didn't file the payment properly. So these are campaign finance criminal conviction based on campaign finance regulations. And Trump, he says that, as you rightly say, he says the Democrats are going after him. He says the judge is biased and should recuse himself because his daughter worked for the Democrats. And the judge himself also gave money to the Democrats and Joe Biden, very small amount of money, but still. So Trump says all of these criminal convictions are basically politically motivated from the Democrats to try and shut him down ahead of November.
Superb. That's Steve Edgington. Thanks for joining us from Washington, D.C. An excellent journalist, and we've seen plenty more of Steve, of course, before that election on November the 5th. Promises to be fireworks. I'm joined now in the studio by Jennifer Ewing, who's a spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK. Always a delight to have you in the studio. Is there a very, very real prospect that Donald Trump could lose his case? He could be prosecuted because he's in New York. It's a state very, very stacked against him. Could this go badly wrong for Donald Trump?
Look, it could, and I think the case cuts both ways, right? We've seen that the left very much thinks that all of these cases are going to sort of discredit Donald Trump, right? But all it's doing is discrediting one of our fine institutions, which is the criminal justice system. It's very, very transparently political, right? And even people who are not fans of Donald Trump are saying, let the voters decide, right? A jury in New York, which, as you said, very, one-sided, I believe it voted New York City 88% for Biden, right? So the jury is most likely, not going to be in favor of Donald Trump. So it could go wrong for him. That's what we'll be watching over today. It's the start of the jury selection. That's really important. I'm told that they were given 42 pages of things that they could ask and not ask to get a feel, while the lawyers decide who they want to put on the jury. The one thing they have been told not to ask, however, which I find interesting, is who they voted for in 2020, which I think it's relevant, right? Since we have the rematch again, that would be something to know. They talk about social media and other things.
Can I ask you, Jennifer, how on earth do you find a jury in New York that doesn't have an opinion about Donald Trump? I mean, he's one of the most famous people in all of America. He resides in New York. Trump Tower is there. Nobody's short of an opinion. Is it even possible to get a jury that's never heard of him or is neutral?
No, I don't. Is the answer. No, it's not, And I think, look, this entire thing is the process is the punishment. What are they getting out of this? Even if they don't get a conviction, they're getting 6 to 8 weeks where in this trial, former President Trump must show up every single day for the case. It's not like a civil trial where you don't have to show up. So they're getting him off the campaign trail for 6 to 8 weeks in the lead up to an election. That's election interference.
Now, if Trump is found against, presumably he will appeal, this will get shoved down the road. Would that go beyond November the 5th and the presidential election any road?
It could, and if you look, they've tried to rush everything to get done before, to do as much damage as possible before the election. And it does matter, even though this is the weakest of all the cases. I mean, let's be honest, this is an NDA case, right? About somebody paying somebody to not disclose an alleged affair. This has been going on since Alexander Hamilton, was paying, I believe, the husband of somebody he had an affair with. So while it's not savory, it's frivolous, and I think it's going to backfire on the left.
I was about to ask you that because historically, until now, at any rate, there hasn't really been a glove land on Trump's chin. In fact, every time he appears in court, it seems to boost his coffers, boost his ratings. Is that happening now? Oh, absolutely. I think they sent out a fundraising message today to get people to start sending more campaign money. And of course, we know that mugshot that ended up on T-shirts and baseball hats and everything raised an absolute fortune. And to your point about every time this happens, he sort of does better. You look back, 9 months ago, and Ron DeSantis and Trump were sort of neck and neck, and then all of a sudden, these very sort of politicized indictments started coming out, and Trump zoomed ahead because, again, if you are a fair-minded person, which I'd like to think most Americans are, you can see that this is wrong. If you don't like Trump, don't vote for him in November. OK. Well, thanks for joining us in the studio. Jennifer Ewing, spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK. Always a delight to have you in the studio. Thank you. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch today using our new webpage, gbnews.com/your say. And I'm going to read out some of those comments in a few minutes. Loads have been coming in. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again, welcome to the Met Office weather forecast. It's going to be a blustery afternoon with further heavy showers coming through. They do ease later on with the chance of clear spells developing overnight, but generally low pressure is in charge of our forecast for the rest of the day. Low pressure sitting in the North Sea, bringing a gusty and cold northwesterly wind with it. These showers are going to be lively where they occur. Hail and thunder a possibility, but they do tend to ease overnight with clear spells developing. The showers becoming more confined to eastern parts along with the gusty wind, and with plenty of clear spells towards western and northwestern parts, temperatures will dip into the mid-single figures, perhaps a bit lower in one or two shelter spots. So a touch of ground frost here and there as we begin Tuesday, but otherwise plenty of bright weather first thing. Still be some cloud and showers along the east coast, and further showers will bubble up as the day gets going elsewhere. But there'll be fewer showers and there'll be more sunshine compared with today, with temperatures responding a little better. 14, perhaps 15 in the south, 11 or 12 further north, and with lighter winds feeling more pleasant. Wednesday starts off with a frost in places, clear spells first thing. Plenty of sunshine through the morning though, although there will be some cloudier skies returning to Northern Ireland later and a few showers elsewhere. All in all, it's looking like an improved picture as we end the week. Higher pressure, drier weather.
Join me, Camila Tomy, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camila Tomy Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria Di Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
earlier on Breakfast.
We're all still talking about those drone attacks on Israel on Saturday night.
We stand by the right for Israel to defend itself, and we'll step up as we did over the weekend.
Development of the Iron Dome defence system is really being done as much in America as it's being done in Israel.
The people in Israel were in their bomb shelters, and it was a particularly stressful time with the sounds of drones and planes overhead the entire night long.
This is Harry's one, but there was Meghan centre stage, and she stood there with holding the treasurer.
From 6, it's Breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 5:50. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, is it time to say Auf Wiedersehen to the United Kingdom? Well, Grand Design's TV presenter Kevin MacLeod has told Britain's struggling first-time buyers to move to Germany, where the housing market apparently is healthy. Well, joining me now to discuss this is property expert Russell Quirk. Russell, welcome to the show. Always an absolute joy. Now, Kevin MacLeod is famed for his stance on Remain. Let's not make this about Brexit, though. Does he have a point? Should young Brits be leaving their motherland and instead go to the fatherland?
No, he doesn't. I think he should stick to architecture and wonderful programmes about weird and wonderful properties across Britain. The reality is, I mean, Germany, ironically, has got one of the weakest economies in Europe right now. Britain is far stronger economically than Germany. But the really odd thing is Germany is very famous for being a rental market, or a market dominated by rental. And in fact, the rate of home ownership, as in owner occupancy in Germany, is only 49% of the population actually own their own home, whereas in Britain it's about 65%. So this is quite an odd and curious thing for Kevin MacLeod to say, especially across the backdrop of news just last week from the Bank of England that as a proportion of total buyers, first-time buyers in Britain are at pretty much their highest level ever. So I don't know what it is with Kevin MacLeod, and maybe, you know, the Gary Linekers and the Emma Thompsons and the Hugh Grants of this world, Charlotte Church and so on, that keep wanting to rubbish and talk down Britain. Why do they do that? And frankly, if they want to continue to do that, why don't they go to Germany themselves?
Well, Russell, it can't be that, because Kevin MacLeod has also talked up the huge opportunities in Holland, the Netherlands, Denmark, Scandinavia, in fact, almost every other North European country, and Canada. The markets are far healthier there, lots more diverse opportunities. It seems to be uniquely Britain that's going down the toilet.
Well, look, I'm no fan of the current government, as I think you know, Martin. And look, you know, we have some issues around housing in terms of lack of supply, for sure. But look, people are still managing to buy homes. You know, the transaction level in this country, in terms of the amount of people that actually buy a property, it's about 1 million people every year. So whilst there is a supply issue, and successive governments certainly haven't built enough homes to go round, whether that's for resale or, you know, social housing, social rent, or affordable homes, you know, actually, despite the fact that some people would say that house prices here are completely unaffordable, the reality in terms of appetite and enthusiasm, the actual data says that people are still buying houses here. Frankly, I'd much rather live here than in Germany, as I say, which is got a pretty much an open door policy on immigrants from anywhere and everywhere across the planet. And as I say, a much weaker economy than Britain. So I think it's a very odd thing for Kevin MacLeod to say. And as I say, look, the flights from Stansted, Heathrow and Gatwick, Kevin, are very, very cheap to Frankfurt and Hamburg. Off you go, mate.
Yeah, Russell Quirk, you brought a wry smile to these jaded old lips when you said we should be saying Auf Wiedersehen to Kevin MacLeod and Gary Lineker et al. Always a pleasure, my mate, to have you on the show. That was Russell Quirk, property expert. Now, you've been sending your emails throughout the show. Want to read out a few. Of course, the big topic is the escalation of Britain getting involved in the conflict in the Middle East. And on that matter, Bob says this: Dear Rishi Sunak, do not wage war on my behalf, especially ones that you have no right poking your nose into. Do not put our sons and brothers and the people of Britain's lives in peril to further your standing on the international stage. On Rwanda, and small boats. Ian says this: we need big, safe boats to same day back to France. It's the only way. Declare of a state of emergency and do it. And finally, on smart motorways, which we covered in the show, Thomas says this: around 50 people are dead because some idiots came up with the idea of smart motorways. It was obvious to everyone and their dog that they would cause deaths, but yet still they carried on. Thank you very much for getting in touch throughout the show, and keep those views coming in. That's all from me for now, but Jubes & Co is up next. And don't forget to join us from 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's breakfast with Eamon and Isabel, followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 with Andrew and Bev. And then, of course, it's Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain from midday. And, of course, you'll have My Ugly Mush back at 3 o'clock tomorrow. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. But now it's your weather, and it's Aidan McGibbon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, welcome to the Met Office weather forecast. It's going to be a blustery afternoon with further heavy showers coming through. They do ease later on with the chance of clear spells developing overnight, but generally low pressure is in charge of our forecast for the rest of the day. Low pressure sitting in the North Sea, bringing a gusty and cold northwesterly wind with it. These showers are going to be lively where they occur. Hail and thunder a possibility. They do tend to ease overnight with clear spells developing. The showers becoming more confined to eastern parts along with the gusty wind, and with plenty of clear spells towards western and northwestern parts, temperatures will dip into the mid-single figures, perhaps a bit lower in one or two shelter spots. So a touch of ground frost here and there as we begin Tuesday, but otherwise plenty of bright weather first thing. Still be some cloud and showers along